Rank is what determines a person's standing. It's also what awakens their desires, strength, intelligence, connections, wealth, occupation, an era in which everything has a rank. It is also where a boy's journey begins. Tully Village sat in a small valley, surrounded on all sides by lush, green mountains. A boy gripped an axe in his hands and brought it down hard on a log. That was Ro, 16 years old, a resident of Tully Village. After working diligently for a while, he wiped the sweat from his hand on the pile of wood and thought, "Good, finally done." Just then Ben ran over calling, "Ro, help me plow the field later. Okay?" He agreed immediately, "Yeah, sure." No sooner had the words left his mouth than a loud shout rang out, accompanied by a kick like a thunderbolt that struck Ben's back. He collapsed to the ground, screaming, "Ah!" Yuna stood with her hands on her hips, pointing at Ben and yelling at the top of her lungs, "Don't always rely on Ro for everything." He clambered to his feet and mumbled, "But Ro just seems absent-minded. He's always got free time anyway." Yuna snorted. Ro was born with that dopey nature. She lunged forward, grabbed Ro's collar and shook him hard. Because Ro helps with everything, he treats his friends like tools. That's not okay at all. But Ro replied naively, "I don't think it's a problem." Yuna softened her tone, "Yeah, I know Ro is very considerate, but..." She suddenly beamed and switched topics. "Oh right, you don't want to go beyond the village, want to try?" Yuna whispered to Ro, "Actually, I know a trail no one else knows." An old woman passing by heard this and cried out, "Absolutely not. Forgot the village rules? We're not allowed to go outside." As she spoke, she raised her cane and struck the girl. Yuna cried, "What are you doing, ma'am?" The old woman didn't answer the question but only scolded, "Either way, you can't. Hey, lock this girl up for a while." Two young men grabbed her and dragged her off. "You're overdoing it, Yuna." She struggled and screamed, "That's ridiculous. Honestly, why is it always like this?" Uncle Tom, who was standing nearby, suddenly lifted his bucket and said, "Ro, can you help me fetch water later?" He answered, "Sure." On the other side, Yuna was still shouting, "In this village, only the two of us are the same age. I don't want to be locked up anymore." Seeing this, Uncle Tom smiled wryly. "You two are completely opposite, huh? Ro should rest sometimes too. You have things you want to do, right?" He replied, "It's fine, I'll help." Ro spoke honestly. After his parents died young, he was left alone. Everyone took him in like family. Actually, I already know that. I know everyone is trying not to let me be alone, so I want to repay that kindness. I cherish this village and everyone in it." Uncle Tom was moved and couldn't hold back tears. "Ro, you're something else. How about you come live at my place from today?" He hurriedly replied, "No." He declined. "The house my parents left still stands. To me, the most important thing is the people in this village. So things like the outside world really don't matter." Yuna was locked in a pen stall with the door bolted. She shook the bamboo bars violently, screaming, "Let me out." The old woman looked helpless, hopeless. "I wish you were half as good as Ro." Yuna suddenly asked, "But ma'am, why are we absolutely not allowed to go outside like that?" The woman replied, "I still summon merchants from time to time, so what's inconvenient about it?" The girl wondered, "That's not it. The outside world is much bigger. So why do we have to live locked up here forever?" The woman pondered for a moment, then said softly, "Because we are ones whom someone hates." The girl asked curiously, "Hated? By whom?" The woman frowned slightly. "That's something you don't need to know. One day, time will sort it out." Meanwhile, Ro was enthusiastically drawing water up from the well, filling a large barrel. He wiped his sweat. Done. The water drawing was finished too. Suddenly, something was thrown straight at Ro's head. He made a startled sound. He turned around. "It's Yuna." The girl put her hand to her mouth and signaled quietly, "Shoo." Then she waved for Ro to come over there. He followed her out onto the little path. Ro asked, "Sneaking out again?" Yuna replied nonchalantly, "I've been caught a few times, so sneaking out is as easy as eating porridge." He grumbled, "That's nothing to brag about." Yuna exclaimed, "Forget about that. Come with me, Ro." He warned her, "If we go outside the village again, the woman will scold us." The girl reassured him, "Just for a little while, it's fine. I want to show Ro a special scene." In the end, the boy couldn't resist the lure of the outside world, and the two squeezed through a gap in the perimeter wall and dashed off. Yuna skipped and sang happily while Ro carefully scanned the surrounding woods. At the end of the path, a blinding light flooded the area. Yuna smiled and said, "Here it is." Ro's gaze suddenly froze. The scene before him left him utterly astonished. A vast open space, majestic mountains, a small stream winding out into a large lake. Yuna shouted excitedly, "Look, Ro, this is the outside world. Is this wide?" Ro uttered a sound of awe. His face lit up. "It's wonderful." Yuna glanced at her friend, then took out a book, flipping through it as she asked, "Hey Ro, do you know the rules of the outside world?" He blurted, "Rules? Of course I know, what the heck." Yuna spread the book's pages, the book I got from a merchant. In the outside world, there's a system called ranks. Adventurers, couriers, healers, musicians. There are many types of rankings, and those listed are called rankers. Even weapons, dishes, powers, or assets can be ranked. This world assigns ranks to everything, and everyone competes seriously with one another. Read each page carefully, so the outside world has its own rules too. Yuna replied excitedly, yeah, but they're not like our village's rules. Sounds interesting, right? I want to become a ranker adventurer. I want to travel everywhere, compete with opponents around the world. And one day I'll be a great adventurer, respected by everyone. Ro looked at his friend's shining eyes, then whispered, but the village's rules forbid going out. Yuna shouted, I don't care. I've decided I'm going. Suddenly, the girl extended her hand before him and said, so, you'll come with me too. Ro, we'll go on an adventure together. Ro, you should step out into the outside world. Hearing this, he was a bit surprised and made a sound of astonishment. Yuna suddenly asked, do you remember? When we were 5, when a big bird attacked me, you saved me. Ro blurted out, really? That happened? The girl was certain, yes, and something glowing green appeared then. Ro thought to himself, something glowing green? Yuna said seriously, since then I've known. Although you usually seem a bit absent-minded, when you're serious, you're stronger than anyone. She reached out her hand toward Ro, smiling brightly. You'd shine even more if you stepped out into this world. So come adventure the world with me. Ro thought of the enticing journey of exploring the world and felt excited inside, but after a moment of reflection he bowed his head and said, thank you, Yuna, but I love this village, so I can't leave. Yuna shouted, really, you're so stubborn. The girl stomped off in a huff. Fine. I'm leaving without you. You can live your whole life in this village, stubborn Ro. He called after her, be careful on your way back. Watching his friend's departing figure, Ro pondered inwardly. Yuna leaving the village? He'd never thought of that. He cast his gaze toward the horizon, the concept of ranking spinning in his head. Evening had fallen. The sunset gilded one corner of the sky. Ro muttered, I guess I should head back too. He pressed both hands to his knees and stood up, his legs numb from sitting too long. Suddenly he noticed something very strange. In the sky there was something like a gigantic rock slowly appearing from behind a large cloud. Ro exclaimed in shock, huh, what is that? That is, suddenly the strange object emitted lightning. A colossal lightning bolt struck the ground with a thunderous crash. Ro clutched his head and screamed. In an instant the dust cleared, and everything returned to an eerie calm as before. Ro looked up at the sky. What the hell is happening? That freak of a thing, it's gone. But he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine, the spot where the lightning had struck. No, it couldn't be. Ro ran frantically back to the village, reassuring himself, it will be fine. Nothing will happen. Yuna, ma'am, and all the villagers. His steps faltered, his eyes vacant. This whole village had completely disappeared without a trace, leaving only a huge crater. Ro was stunned beyond belief. What is this? What the hell is this? He climbed down into the crater, muttering, village, impossible. Ro called out loudly, Yuna, ma'am, anyone? Is anyone there? Tears streamed down his face as he remembered his little friend Yuna saying, it's okay, Ro, I'll always be by your side. And the kind villagers too, from today on, we're family. You are not alone. Ro collapsed in agony, screaming, why did this happen? Suddenly a voice rang out, damn it, I'm late again. All I can do is stand and watch. Adel saw a boy still sitting in the crater and jumped down into it. He asked in surprise, you're the sole survivor from Tully Village? Ro replied, His eyes showed some pity. The kid must be in a lot of pain. Adel reassured him, don't worry, that island's gone. Ro blurted, island? Do you know what that just was? He grabbed Adel's sleeve, choking. Tell me, the village, what happened to everyone? What happened? What was that thing? Seeing Ro's tear-soaked face, Adel felt a pang of sorrow and handed him a small scrap of paper, advising, leave the village. Go to the place written here. You'll be safe there. Ro shouted, answer me. Adel snapped back loudly. Look at the situation, the whole village is gone. This isn't a world meant for a kid like you. He shoved Ro aside, stood up, and walked away. Forget everything that happened. That's the only thing you can do. I'm begging you, don't dig any deeper. That's the only way you won't have to sacrifice anymore. Ro lowered his head and murmured, no. Yuna's words echoed in his mind. I know him well. Though Ro usually seems absent-minded, when he's serious, he's stronger than anyone. And right now, that pale green light she mentioned was radiating with great power. Adel sensed a terrible power behind him and turned to look. He was stunned. What is going on? Ro ground his teeth and growled. How could I forget? I'll go to that island, and I will bring everyone back. When I was little, my parents died in a landslide, and I became an orphan. The villagers took care of me and raised me. Yuna was always by my side. They were all good people who couldn't ignore others' suffering. Ro screamed in fury, all of them. How could I ever forget? I'll go to that island, and I'll definitely bring everyone back. Adel studied the pale green light radiating from the boy carefully. What is that amount of prana? The space around them was warping. Prana is a creature's mental energy. Anyone can possess it, but few are truly aware of it. But those with talent are deliberately using it. Normally it's transparent and colorless, but those with strong prana can make it manifest. And they say some people possess exceptionally large amounts of prana. Adel finally realized so this is a remnant of Babel. At first I planned to prioritize protecting him, but in a few years he would have escaped on his own anyway. After thinking for a moment, he gripped the sword hilt and said, I know nothing about the situation here. Adel drew his sword and tossed it toward Ro. The blade stuck into the ground in front of the boy. He said, if you want to reach the island, take the sword. If I see potential, I'll train you. Ro showed no fear and immediately picked up the sword. Adel produced another sword. He channeled his energy, his prana blazing crimson and fierce, and shouted, attack me with lethal intent, as if you mean to kill me. Ro poured all his strength into the blade and leapt to strike. The sword's edge came down straight at Adel. He thought to himself, the boy is a complete novice. Immature, yet this pressure, and above all, this flow of prana is not ordinary. This kid, he's a rare find. A dazed Ro, at last, let murderous intent flash in his eyes. Booms reverberated, shaking the tiny valley. After the duel, Adel told Ro about the strange object that destroyed Tully Village, the Island of the Gods, as people called it. Normally it floats out on the open sea, but rarely it appears elsewhere and sweeps away both people and land. I acted to stop it, but this time I was too late. Rumor says those covered by that light are pulled into the Island of the Gods. Ro asked, if I touch that light then? Adel replied, I said it's only a rumor. Even if you survive, who knows what you'd have to endure. He asked again, so what should I do? Adel suggested, for now there's one proper route. Get into the adventurer rank. Make the top 10. Ro exclaimed, the adventurer rank? He explained, adventurers specialize in surveying and exploring uncharted lands. It's the largest rank, and those at the top are monsters. If you break into the top 10 among them, you'll be allowed to go to the Island of the Gods. Since its discovery, the island has consistently topped the danger area rankings. Almost no adventurer has ever returned. Adel asked again, do you still want to go? Ro answered solemnly, yes. Seeing the boy's resolute gaze, Adel replied, fine, I'll train you for 1 year from now. But all I can teach is swordsmanship. So after a year, use me as your springboard. Then climb the adventurer ranks on your own. Only then did he formally introduce himself. I'm Adel, leader of the knight rank, the strongest knight of humanity. What's your name? You raised your hand to answer abruptly, Ro. Then he gripped Adel's hand tightly. Adel said, Ro, I won't go easy on you. Besides, the first person to cut me just one strike was you. The long tear in Adel's tunic across his chest was proof. A year of hell began. His hands and feet blistered until they burst. His muscles were torn apart. Bones were crushed. Blood gushed from every orifice. After that, Adel said nothing more about the Island of the Gods. The rest I had to investigate myself. If I couldn't, then consider it giving up, he implied. I believe the villagers are still alive. For now, all I can do is keep believing that. Why did the whole village vanish? What exactly is the Island of the Gods? To uncover the truth, I will climb the adventurer ranks. And Ro persevered through it all. A year later, Ro and Adel stood at the dirt road leading into the village. Adel asked, are you ready? Ro replied, I've been ready for a long time. He closed his eyes and recalled how Yuna had once said, I want to become a high-ranking adventurer. Ro, come with me. Let's go on an adventure. Yuna, who always dreamed of the outside world, was gone, and I was the one setting out. I'll keep Yuna's dream safe for now. Adel said, let's go. He answered, yeah. He suddenly blurted, you've grown a lot. Ro replied casually, I'm just going through a growth spurt. The disciple of humanity's strongest knight. The adventure toward the Island of the Gods officially began. Tully Village belongs to the kingdom of Baltar. To get to the Island of the Gods, you must first go to the capital, Trakista. At that moment, at the Assessment Bureau Trakista branch, on Look's desk, towering stacks of ledgers were piled high. The girl lay asleep across the table. Outside someone was buzzing. Look over there, it's almost time. Suddenly Look snapped awake, shouting, I'm doomed. I overslept. Rushing into the hallway, Look ran into Mina, who nagged, up all night again watching the rankings? Look replied nonchalantly, what's wrong with that? I'm from the Assessment Bureau. Mina warned, precisely because you're from the Assessment Bureau, you should take better care of your health. Unlike someone who works indoors like me, you're the one with decision-making power over many people's ranks, right? The Assessment Bureau. a profession sent across the world to evaluate rankers' abilities and update their rankings appropriately. The Bureau demands vast knowledge, professional expertise, and impartial judgment to hold the role of assessing the strong and the weak. The assessor themselves must pass countless tests. It's a role reserved for the chosen. It's regarded as one of the hardest professions in the world. Look replied modestly, even though I'm with the Assessment Bureau, I'm just a low-level employee. To do what I want, I need a promotion, and to get that, I have to work harder. Mina suddenly asked, what do you want to do? Look grinned broadly, oh, all sorts of things. The curious girl said, if you want to advance in the Bureau, becoming a private agent for a talented ranker is the best route, right? Look sighed, that's true, but not many rankers catch my eye. Mina exclaimed, see, your standards are sky high. She replied plainly, no. It's just that today's rankers are too half-hearted. Back in the day, the battle for ranks was far more brutal. Now the top spots on any chart are almost fixed. Then what's the point of the Assessment Bureau still existing? A ranking only holds value because it gets updated. Mina laughed, you're such a rankings fanatic. Look admitted, totally. Hearing that, the girl could only mutter that it was a serious case. Look grumbled. Sigh, is there really no one? A new star could topple the whole leaderboard. Mina opened the door and said, that star might be in here. Looking out, the lecture hall was packed with candidates. Look suddenly asked, this is the third time they've held the Adventurer Ranking Registration exam this year, right? Is it always this crowded? Mina replied, usually it's less. The number of applicants spiked. Could it be because the Azaban Forest was added to the dangerous area list 2 months ago? Look made a sound of realization, I see. Mina stood on the platform, observing. There are indeed many promising candidates this time. First is a mercenary ranker, number 753, Owl Darkus. He's the captain of the Red Wolf Mercenary Company, a strikingly prominent new unit praised even at the national level. On the other side is an archer ranker, number 402, Eddie Markman. The Markman clan is famed for archers. His father once held rank 2 at his peak, and his brother is currently ranked 7. Eddie, though very young, is rumored to have arrow speeds in the double digits, very promising. Besides them, there were many other standouts. For example, that person over there. Look glanced below and guessed, a merchant ranker, right? Knight rankers, sailor rankers, even scout rankers. Mina was amazed. Yeah, all of them, he chuckled. Even so, I'm from the Assessment Bureau. From a glance, I can tell which leaderboard someone belongs to. The Adventurer Ranker title is especially useful, so many people later want it. It's also a requirement to enter special terrains like that forest. Suddenly, a bell rang outside. Mina ran out. Someone is here to register. Please wait a moment. She stepped up to the desk and said, welcome. Ro bowed his head and quietly said, I was assigned here to register for ranking. She stepped up to the desk and said, welcome. Ro bowed his head and quietly said, I was assigned here to register for ranking. Rank updates can be done anywhere there's bureau staff present, but initial registration must be done at each branch. Ro said, I want to register for the Adventurer Leaderboard. Mina smiled warmly. Oh, just in time. The exam is about to start. Do you want to participate? He replied, yes. The girl placed a registration form on the desk. Please fill in your name and required information on this form. The exam fee is 3,000 del. Ro completed the paperwork and paid the fee immediately. Mina announced, all done. Thank you. Please wait in that room. Your registration number is 53. Ro passed by Look and stole a quick glance at him. Turns out there are still some country bumpkins who don't even know what the Assessment Bureau is. Mina agreed, yeah, it's been a while since we had to explain that. She said to her friend, then hey, help prepare for the exam. Look watched Rose retreating back and replied, sure, working inside once in a while isn't bad. Mina muttered, are you being sarcastic? He said, I'm serious. Mina stood on the podium and announced, the Adventurer Ranking Registration exam will begin now. There are 3 parts. First is the written test, then the combat test. The final portion will be explained before it starts. Passing or failing will be based on the total score of all 3 sections. If you do poorly in one part but well in the others, you can still pass. So please don't give up halfway. After explaining, she signaled, begin the written test now. The examinees finished reading and felt extremely tense. It was really hard. The scope was far too wide. Before long, time was up. Mina reminded the candidates that the combat portion would be held in the forest outside the village in 2 hours. After grading the written tests, we'll escort you there, so please wait here. She carried the stack of exams into the room and called, hey, help me grade these. Look replied eagerly, okay. The 2 of them focused on their work. Look picked up Ro's exam. Number 53. It's that dead-eyed guy from earlier. He skimmed the paper and felt shaken inside. This was, question 1. List 3 sea routes to Yatsuba. The answers read, I don't know. Question 2. Identify which demonic beast's descendant is shown in the illustration using the symbols 2 or 3. Look froze everything. All wrong. His expression drained. He muttered that they really should consider the feelings of those dragged into this souvenir exam for countryfolk. 2 hours later, the combat test began. Mina explained the practical exercise. A treasure hunt. You must turn in the items listed on this board. If you want a high score, consult the points table on the right. But contestants are forbidden from fighting each other. Whoever touches a target item first has the right to claim it. One person said, "I'm pretty confident in my herbal knowledge." The person next to him replied, "I'm good at catching bugs." Mina signaled, "Then begin the practical test." The group of candidates rushed into the forest. The girl exhaled in relief. Finally, a short break. How many will pass this time? Look guessed, probably about half. Once they start moving like this, it's much more predictable. Still, everyone seems pretty skilled this time. Watching the candidates search intently for items, Mina asked, "Hey, anyone catch your eye?" Look sighed sadly, "Not this time either." Owl Darkus returned and announced, "Am I the first back?" Owl handed Mina a handful of stones. She evaluated them. "Rigel or 120 points?" Mina asked, "There's still time, are you finished?" He answered, "Yeah, I'll pass anyway, right?" She explained, "That's true, but if you score well on this section, you can register at a higher rank." Owl replied indifferently, "Doesn't matter. My main job is as a mercenary. I'm not that interested in the adventurer rankings." At that moment, Eddie Markman returned as well. Seeing Owl, he shouted, "What, I thought I was first." Mina examined the item. A flockbird tail feather, 180 points. Eddie asked, "Is that point value okay?" "Flockbirds show up on my dinner table all the time." Owl mocked, acting proud over a single bird feather. Eddie flexed casually, "I'm not acting proud, but a bird that flies silently at 500 kilometers an hour, you might not even notice it with the naked eye." Owl showed no irritation and replied, "Sorry, I didn't realize. Maybe you'd be better suited as a jester." Eddie snapped, "Wanna try?" He scoffed, "Bring it on." Seeing the two trade barbs, Mina smiled wryly. Rankers are way too prideful. Look, meanwhile, looked excited. That's exactly a ranker's strength. Suddenly, heavy footsteps sounded on the other side, and everyone turned to look in astonishment. Mina gasped. Ro emerged from the forest, dragging a giant bear behind him. He set his trophy down in front of the examiners, and honestly said, "I don't know how to extract a red bear's bile sac, so I brought the whole animal. Can I submit it like this?" Mina replied, "Yes, you can, but no need to dissect it. The red bear's bile sac, 300 points. The other contestants watched with curiosity. "Hey, who is that guy?" He single-handedly took down a red bear. Look suddenly asked, "How did you know that beast was a red bear?" "Your written test was a disaster." Ro replied, "It appears pretty often near my village, so I know it." Look blurted, "Your village?" Then Look heard other contestants whispering, "Didn't you see him fight?" The other person said, I happened to see it in person, but saying I saw it isn't exactly right." Just as he drew his sword, in the blink of an eye, the red bear was down. Those words shocked him, and he began to look at Ro differently. An hour later, the contestants moved to the underground training area. Mina asked, "Everyone, do you know the greatest threats adventurers must watch out for?" "Probably demonic beasts and humans." She began to explain the new test. An adventurer's duty is to explore new lands, and naturally they often have to go to remote places. In those situations, enemies are often bandits or pirates. Strength is essential to overcome those dangers. Therefore, the final test is a simulated combat. The contestants will fight one another. This is only a personal skills assessment, so don't be overly tense. Winning isn't the only criterion for passing. Eddie exclaimed, "I see if they'd made that clear from the start, some people might have cheated during the practical test. That's why they kept it secret until the last minute." Big Chad slapped Owl on the shoulder and suggested, "Hey, you there. Fight me." He taunted, "In the earlier test you only picked up a rock, right? I've heard of that mercenary ranking, just a bunch of rude blowhards." Suddenly Chad growled, "Rank 3 and you still act big? I'll crush you," then hurled a punch at him. Owl didn't even respond or dodge. He drew the pommel and struck backward, landing on the attacker's jaw. Chad, blood and teeth mixed, collapsed to the ground. Owl said calmly, "Sorry, I couldn't control my anger at being insulted." Mina pushed her glasses up and added, "That person had actually failed in earlier rounds, so let's pretend we didn't see what happened." Chad was carried out of the competition area. Even if he tried to back out now, he was still a fool. In the big rankings, the top 3 are monsters. Eddie said, "He looks calm, but who's to know he'd be so hot-headed?" Owl snapped, "I don't want to hear that from you." Mina pondered, "Owl's opponent is where else would he be?" Suddenly Look called, "Hey." She turned back and asked, "What's up?" Look looked at Ro and said, "Can I choose an opponent for him?" Mina replied, Fine, but why?" The simulated combat tournament began. In this event, the contestants' true strength becomes very clear. Everyone tried their hardest to prove themselves. Match 8 began. Number 27 and number 41, together with number 53. Numbers 27 and 41 would form a team. The two would face number 53 together. I'll ask the examiners, are you serious? Eddie muttered. It's been a long time since I've been so looked down on. Mina quickly cried, wait. Look, are you sure? You confirmed, I'm sure. If my eyes don't deceive me, then that person is a monster. All three contestants immediately stepped down into the arena. All the spectators were very curious, wondering how this match would turn out. Ro kept a cold expression. Owl was full of confidence. And Eddie was no slouch. Owl Darkus, leader of the Red Wolf Company, a mercenary organization. Last year, the Red Wolf Company made a name for itself by wiping out the Khmer Mafia, ranking 62nd on the underworld charts. Rumor has it that the young leader Owl single-handedly defeated 7 enforcers, including their leader, Eddie Markman, heir of the famed Markman Bao clan. He received elite training from his father from a young age. His father once held the second spot on the archers' rankings. By age 5, he was already on the rankings, becoming a prodigy no one in the archery world could ignore. And the one facing those two figures was an unknown teenage boy. Mina shouted, the match begins. Eddie fired an arrow at lightning speed. Ro immediately raised his sword and smashed the arrow. Owl lunged in a direct attack. Their blades clashed and sparks flew. Ro, trained as a disciple of the strongest knight, wielded blade techniques as fast as lightning with devastating cutting force. Owl met the strikes fiercely, never wavering. The audience was stunned. One person asked, hey, can you see anything? The man next to him replied, all I can hear is the sound. Ro seized an opening and knocked Owl's sword away. Just as he prepared to deliver the finishing blow, a volley of arrows shot forth. Ro immediately turned to block. His sword split one arrow in two. They changed course and plunged into the wall, grazing a contestant's neck and leaving him pale with fear. Both sides froze for a moment. Owl blurted, a swordsman, no, a master of knight-tier skill? Eddie replied, I thought so too, but I've never seen anyone like him. Ro suddenly asked, are you two also listed on other rankings? Eddie answered, archer's rank, 402. Owl said, soldier's rank, 753. He quietly gathered his prana. So that's it. If I defeat both of them, I'll surely climb into the 3-digit ranks. Prana flared a brilliant green across the arena, and air pressure suddenly rose. A feeling of dread appeared on the faces of those in the arena. Owl felt a sudden fear in his heart. What? This guy's aura is suddenly overwhelming. Look was stunned. Is that prana? A massive amount of prana so large it could be seen with the naked eye. Eddie drew his bow and aimed. Ranking isn't determined solely by profession. On the archer's board, I'm 402. But on the marksman list, where precision is fiercely contested, I rank 78. No sooner had he finished speaking than a figure flashed past Eddie. The kid fell and rolled, lying unconscious. Ro moved like a lightning strike, and no one saw how he had wounded Eddie. Al still didn't know what to do when Ro strode forward, meeting him with an unrelenting gaze. Al froze. Ro had darted behind him in the blink of an eye, the cold tip of his sword pressed at Owl's throat. He blurted out, wait, I surrender. I still have to work after this. So if I pass out like that kid, it's going to be a hassle. Hearing that, Ro withdrew his sword and sheathed it. I see. Owl broke into a cold sweat, glancing at him and thinking to himself, what a monster. Who on earth is this guy? The other contestants trembled in fear, no kidding. That guy had defeated those 2 3-digit ranked fighters. Look was also stunned into silence. Mina shouted, that's enough. The winner is number 53. Suddenly she saw Look sprinting inside. Where are you going? Look rushed into the archive room and booted up the computer. The Adjudication Bureau's database displayed the profile for contestant number 53. The name was Ro Tully, 17 years old, never registered on the rankings before. How could his skills be like that? He read the details carefully and realized the boy didn't know much about the Bureau either. If he'd lived in a remote area, that would explain it. He'd never committed any crimes, nor did he belong to any special sect. Look's hand trembled slightly. Jackpot. A talent like this had been buried for years. He dashed back out, threw open the door and shouted, Ro Tully, let me be your exclusive adjudicator. But surrounding Ro now were dozens of adjudicators. A girl called out, hey you, why not hire me as your exclusive adjudicator? An older man butted in, no wait, I'm the one who's more suitable for you. Look froze completely, one step too late. He was furious inside. These people offering exclusive deals, you should at least verify someone's identity before making that offer. Ro still didn't understand what was happening. He hesitated and asked, what's an exclusive adjudicator? Look lunged like a gale. Let me explain. An exclusive adjudicator is someone assigned solely to a specific ranker, and whose duty is to update their ranking regularly. Normally, to update a ranking, you have to wait for someone from the adjudication bureau to be sent out to conduct an evaluation and level them up. But if you have an exclusive adjudicator, updates can be made on the spot at any time. This is crucial for rankers who roam the world. Look rummaged through his coat, took out a device, and moreover, an adjudicator also carries a specialized device for ranking telegrams, called a ranktel for short, helping to deliver the latest updates anytime, anywhere. He emphasized, if you want to climb the rankings quickly, you should hire a talented exclusive adjudicator. Ro exclaimed, if I want to rise in rank quickly, I have one condition. He turned to look at all the adjudicator applicants there. Is there anyone who can get me into the top 10 of the adventurers' rankings? Hearing that, everyone present was stunned. Someone shouted that the top 10 of the adventurer rankings are all monsters. The person beside him agreed. His swordsmanship is impressive, but that's not enough to make the top 10. Ro fell silent for a moment. Look stared at him for a while, and seeing that no one could meet his condition, Ro turned and left. Look called after him, wait. He immediately ran after him out to the gate. Ro walked so fast she had to run breathlessly to keep up. She asked, Ro, why do you want to get into the top 10 of the adventurer rankings? He replied, that's none of your business. Look said, then make it my business. I'll become your exclusive adjudicator. I'll lead you into the top 10 of the adventurer rankings. Ro kept striding and bluntly refused. I won't put children in danger. Look shouted, what? Children? A kid can be your exclusive adjudicator? Actually, you're a kid too, Ro added, and even if you weren't, I still wouldn't hire you. He said slowly, I don't want to involve other people. Look looked at him with determined eyes and shouted, there's something I absolutely must do. For me, I have a mission I must complete, even if it costs my life. To do that, Ro, I want to team up with you. Ro suddenly stopped, turned back to look at Look, and he suddenly remembered his own resolute words to Adel. I'll go to that island and I will bring everyone back. Ro said, same here. I have something I must do. The two stood together under the brilliant evening sun and became teammates. He said confidently, look Amelia, I'll make you a top-ranked ranker. He introduced himself, Ro Tully. The two shook hands and formed a bond. Afterwards, Look took him to a boarding room. A small, tidy, clean space with a balcony overlooking the street. He asked him, so, nice room, right? Look said cheerfully, I rented it for a few days, so use it as your base. Ro replied, thanks, you're too kind. Look took off his bag and tossed it onto the bed. No big deal. Suddenly he shouted that he hadn't expected there to be a probation period after that spectacular show. Ro said nonchalantly, sorry, it's just a spare room. You have no other choice. Accept it, huh? Fine, I'll show you how driven I am within a week. By then, we'll see who's worth more. He put on a pleading face, pretending to be Ro a week from now. Whoa, Look, become my exclusive assessor. That's what he'd say. He replied blandly, hopefully. The other snapped, don't be so indifferent. When he fights, he's always serious, but normally, how to put it, kind of absent-minded. Ro agreed, I've heard others say that about him a lot. Look affirmed, definitely. Suddenly the ranktel device chimed. Look took it out and checked. The test results are in. Here is your rank. The screen displayed the information. Ro Tully, Adventurer rank, 2,728. He cheered happily. Congratulations on passing the Adventurer rank assessment. Surprised? Just registered and you're already in the 2000s. That's an impressive rank. He wasn't satisfied with the result. He'd expected a 3-digit rank. Look asked in surprise. Why's that? Ro answered, because both opponents I fought in the test had 3-digit ranks. Eddie the Archer, rank 402. Owl the Soldier, rank 753. Look explained, the Adventurer leaderboard has more contestants than other boards, so the competition's tougher. Other leaderboards, no matter how strong they are, they still have limits. A ranking board doesn't exist solely based on profession. For example, Ro Tully currently, Adventurer rank 2,728. Swordsman rank 58. His swordsman rank is 58, that's a high ranking. Ro asked, so. Look had to explain again, so what else from the appraisal bureau's perspective? This number reflects talent. He wondered, did the two people I fought earlier have similar other ranks? The other answered, yes, Owl and Eddie have similar ranks. Owl Darkus, Soldier rank 753. Swordsman rank 521. Sweeper rank 209. Messenger rank 2,831. Reliable Leader rank 86. Eddie Markman. Archer rank 402. Sharpshooter rank 78. Scout rank 211. Mushroom Cultivation rank 19. Look suggested, one person can have many ranks. That brings more job opportunities. So I think Ro should register on more ranking boards. He refused. I'm not looking for work. Look said casually, although we haven't known each other long, I think I understand you a bit. In short, you want to reach the top 10 on the adventurer board by shortcut, right? Then, go to the God Island. Ro was a little surprised. How do you know? Look replied slowly, because that's the exclusive privilege only those in the Adventurer Top 10 receive. As for why, you'll tell me after the probation ends, won't you? Ro agreed. Fine. He added cheerfully, then I'll tell you about my situation too. He thought that fair, let's do that. That would be fair to both sides. Look protested, of course fairness is important, but my situation. It's a bit hard to explain to someone who's only just registered on the board. Suddenly he went serious and whispered, what I'm hunting is the dark side of the ranking boards. Ro blurted, what did you say? Look shook his head. Nothing, then changed the subject, but how did you get such power? Especially that swordsmanship. It's not something you can achieve overnight, right? Ro said honestly, a year ago I became the disciple of a knight named Adel. The moment he heard the name, Look shouted. Adel. He grabbed his collar and shouted excitedly. Adel, you mean the top-ranked knight? Ro recalled his master's introduction. I am Adel, foremost among knights, the strongest knight of humanity, and replied flatly, yes, he did say that. Look emitted a small sound, stirred inside. Ro added that he'd only been a disciple for 1 year. The boy babbled. Only a year. But this is earth-shattering news. Why the indifferent look? Look opened Adel's profile for Ro to see. Adel was famous for refusing to teach swordsmanship to anyone. Many had sought him as a master and were turned away. If there were a ranking for masters who reject disciples, Adel would top it. Rumor had it he intended to pass his art on to whoever would lead the next generation of knights on the leaderboard. That's why many knights were risking everything to climb the ranks. But unexpectedly, you became his successor. The other knights would faint if they heard that. Hearing this, Ro was a little surprised. He's that great? Adel once said he was the strongest knight of humanity. Look confirmed, of course, he's ranked number 1, meaning the strongest in the world. He blurted out, but I beat him with my own sword. Adel had said then, you are the first person who could land a hit on me, even if it was only 1 strike. Look couldn't believe it and shouted, no, that can't be. You really are careless but bold. How did you rise in rank? I need to recheck the data. The system only showed basic info, Ro Tully. Even searching the ranking database, it only appeared as a newly registered name. He suddenly asked, is that surname a nickname? That remark reminded Ro of Adel, who once asked, Ro, what is your family name? At the time Ro didn't even know what a family name was. Adel muttered that it might be a cultural difference. He said, if you want the shortest path to the God Island, from now on you are Ro Tully. The risk is very high, but if it works out, the clue will reach you first. He looked at the blazing sun in the distance and replied shortly, understood. Now, facing Look's question, Ro answered solemnly, it's not a nickname. Tully is the honored family title of my house. He blinked in slight astonishment. I see. Thanks for telling me. He sat down on the bed and said with relief, time to rest. My assessor duties are over. I'll take my hat off too. Look removed her hat and sighed with relief. Ro froze, then asked awkwardly, kid, are you a girl? Look stared at him wide-eyed. What you just realized? Realizing he'd slipped up, Ro mumbled, sorry. She trembled with anger, her face flushed purple, and she shouted furiously, all you can do is apologize? The next morning, with the sun high, sunlight poured over the small neighborhood. In the boarding room, Look sat reading a newspaper. She saw Ro come down the stairs and cheerfully said, you're up early. He replied, just getting some water. Look eyed his dazed face. Huh, not fully awake yet? Ro said, it's nothing. Good morning, Look. She answered, good morning. Look quickly tied her hair up neatly, put on her hat and said, let's go get breakfast. It will be a long journey, but today is the first step. The girl winked, all right. Let's hold a strategy meeting to get into the Adventurer Board's top 10. To raise your adventurer rank, you need achievements while adventuring. Look held a sandwich, eating as she spoke. Pioneering or exploring is basic. You can volunteer, but I advise taking on contracts first. Many people want to borrow an adventurer's strength for gathering or investigation. Contracts also offer rewards, so they're perfect for newcomers. You can accept contracts at the appraisal bureau, or through a guild depending on the country. But if I'm here, all you need is this. She tapped the rank tell to pull up information. Ro said cheerfully, the rank tell system, right? Convenient. Look puffed up a little. Right, if I become your personal appraiser, you can use it freely. He replied nonchalantly, I'll think about it. She was left speechless by his blank face. They huddled to inspect it. Ro asked if there were any contracts that easily boosted rank. Look opened folders. Just accept contracts with high difficulty. Contracts through the appraisal bureau will show exactly how completing them affects rank, like this. Ro reviewed briefly, then chose, then I'll take the top contract. She read carefully, let's see. Recover the hidden treasure in the underwater Lokiana temple. Danger rating, level 7. Look suddenly sprang up, shouting, no way, you can't do that now. Ro answered firmly, you won't know unless you try. She insisted, I know, I can tell without you trying. trust an appraiser's eye. This contract is beyond you right now. Are you planning to die before your rank rises? But he still refused to give up. Regardless, let me try. The God Island is a danger rating 1 area, right? You can't back down here. Hearing this, Look was a bit startled. She thought to herself that he's more stubborn than she expected and wondered how to persuade him. At that moment, a young man appeared, smiling ingratiatingly. Looks like you two are in trouble. Look exclaimed, Loud-san. He replied, long time no see. Look. Ro asked who he was. She replied cheerfully, let me introduce you. This is Loud Blower Ward, an extremely formidable person. He's currently ranked 11 on the adventurer board. Ro froze. Ranked 11? He recalled Adol saying the adventurer board had the most people, and the top spots were full of monsters. If he's one of those monsters, that means he's a top-tier adventurer. If he's at 11, then moving up just 1 rank lets you challenge the God Island. Look said abruptly, perfect timing, Loud-san, I have a favor to ask. He responded casually, sure, what is it? She shouted loudly, Ro, please, beat him. Look and Ro stood in the arena waiting. After a moment Loud entered, saying, sorry to keep you waiting. I didn't expect a challenge, so I borrowed a weapon. Loud held a spear, a bit light but should be fine. He introduced himself politely. I am Ro Tully, sir. Loud said, you're not used to formal speech, huh? Just relax. On the adventurer board, no ceremony is needed. Look once updated the rankings for me. Look is really skilled, not only deeply knowledgeable but also has strong faith in creating accurate rankings. That passion is something other appraisers lack. If it's a request from Look, I want to help as much as I can. He twirled the long spear in his hands, imitating Look's voice. Please teach the stubborn rookie his place. She seems to care about you. Ro paid little attention to the flattery. He watched his opponent carefully and could sense his strength just by looking. If I just charge in, that spear could pierce me right through. Look shouted, Ro, this is a great opportunity. You need to taste how vast this world is at least once. He lowered his head and pondered for a moment. If it's about the world's vastness, I already know it. The image of the God Island destroying the Tully village never left his mind. Ro pointed the tip of his sword at Loud, his prana flaring out strongly. The duel, Tully, adventurer ranked 2728, versus Loud Brower Ward, adventurer ranked 11. Begin. Both sides launched into attack. Ro poured internal power into his sword and unleashed a flurry of strikes. Loud moved as quick as lightning. He sidestepped, avoiding the blows while assessing his opponent. He channeled prana into his armor and released it through a slash. Was he boosting speed by wrapping prana around his arms and legs? Loud handled the spear with great skill, but then he realized this sword technique. Impossible. The Holy Sword School passes its art to a single heir. There's no way he'd teach the ultimate sword way to only one person for life, especially to a child like this. Ro suddenly moved behind Loud. He cautioned, now's not the time for daydreaming, right? He immediately brought the spear down behind him, blocking Ro's blade. Loud smiled amiably. I'm feeling pretty comfortable. He cleared his throat. Ahem, truly a seasoned hand. Both sides plunged into close-quarters combat. The clash of weapons rang harshly. Loud thought to himself that even judging by prana alone, there was more than he'd expected, and that shimmering light. He suddenly took a few steps back. Loud asked, what clan are you from? Ro exclaimed in surprise. Clan? Loud smiled, feigning ignorance. It's pointless to hide. That prana shimmer isn't something you get just from training. He spun the spear in his hand. Fine. If you won't say it, I'll pull it out myself. Loud planted the spear in the ground and suddenly asked, you can use clan mantras, right? Ro grew more confused by the moment. Clan mantras, what's that? Loud circulated his chi. His prana flared golden and intense as he muttered a decisive mantra. Wild horse charge, tearing the veil. Cross the icy peaks. Seek the breath of spring. Under the sun, the jade bell rings. Reflect the water's face. A thousandfold whirl. Find the silent place, turn the heel, change. A formation took shape and countless phantom blades manifested. The power it emitted was terrifying. Loud continued chanting. Surpassed by the bow's aim. Soar across the sky's back. Clan mantra. Bind the wind's words. Halt the raging swarm. Even Look standing outside felt the oppressive aura and grew uneasy. Ro remained frozen. Loud warned, you should use yours too. Otherwise, you'll die. He stared at his opponent. Ro had never known what clan mantras were. Loud's formation was complete. He pushed up his glasses slightly. Ro blurted out, this is... Loud thrust his hand forward. All the phantom blades shot straight at Ro. He sensed the danger of the technique and put all his strength into resisting. A blade of ki sliced across his hand, tearing a small wound. Ro gasped. Loud said, that won't do, An ordinary sword can't block this chant. He snapped his fingers, and blades shot out like rain, forcing Ro into a desperate defense. He struggled to hold his ground after the strike. Adel once said, Ro, you're still pretty clumsy at controlling prana. But once you get used to it, you'll gradually be able to use techniques. At that time, Ro didn't even know what techniques were. Adel raised his sword and watched closely. He launched the first move, the simplest technique, the piercing gale of the assassin. And now, Ro gathered his chi, channeling prana into his blade, and unleashed an extremely powerful counterattack. A terrifying force surge hurtled toward Loud. He was slightly surprised, too fast. Loud spun his spear and blocked the force. As the sword energy dissipated, Ro appeared right before him. Loud continued attacking with phantom blades, while he himself leapt back several steps to defend. Clang, 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 Ro struck back fiercely, and now Loud was more alert. A super-fast slash arrived so quick the eye couldn't follow, but he poured more power into his arm, then hurled the spear at his opponent. Ro used his sword to block. The spear tip struck the blade, but it didn't alter its trajectory. In an instant it slammed Ro backward, and the sword in his hand was flung out. Before Ro could react, Loud exclaimed, "Impressive," then snapped his fingers, but the wall was very high. All the phantom blades aimed at Ro, and both Look and Ro were extremely worried. A deadly gleam flashed in Loud's eyes as he growled, "Don't underestimate the adventurer rankings." Ro tried to spring up quickly, but it was too late. The phantom blades came down like rain. He swore, "Damn it, boom, boom, boom." The explosions roared as earth and dust billowed. Ro lay in a large crater. The blast power of the technique was terrifying. Suddenly the space fell eerily silent. Winner, Loud Brower Ward, rank 11 adventurer. Loud stepped up to Look and asked if she was satisfied. The girl smiled and said, "Yes, thank you." Ro probably understands now, he said coldly, "You sure know how to talk." Until the very last moment. "You still believed that kid would win, didn't you?" Look replied, "I only thought it was possible." Loud added, "And the basis for that belief was because he's Adel's disciple, right?" Look replied softly, "You noticed." He said calmly, "I knew the moment I saw that super fast slash that it was a technique from the sword school. I don't know if that's okay. The holy sword school is only passed down to a single successor. It's the strongest sword art, inherited by high-ranking knights for generations. And yet that brat inherited it. For a knight, that's like having your faith stolen." Hearing this, Look clutched her head and cried out, "Maybe so. Perhaps I should stop Ro from meeting any high-ranking knights from now on." Loud agreed that's wise. At worst he could lose his life. If he operated as a high-ranking knight, things might have gone more smoothly. But Look suddenly remembered, Ro had once said, "Me too. There's something I absolutely must accomplish. And that stubborn kid won't accept such an offer." She told Loud that might be impossible. The girl shifted to another topic. "Oh, but actually the reason I believed Ro wasn't because of the Holy Sword School. It was because he said he landed a legitimate hit on Adel. I believe him." Loud exclaimed in surprise. "A legitimate hit on Adel? No way, at his current level there's no chance." Look agreed, "I thought so too. But Ro isn't the kind to lie. Maybe there's more to the story." Loud glanced at the kid. The Holy Sword School was already a surprise, but I suspect that prana flow. Seeing him suddenly step toward the spear, Look called out, "Loud." He picked up the spear and slowly said, "Maybe that boy also has mantras. If he used those, I could have lost." A girl stood by the hearth, cooking, humming the tune of a poem. Suddenly an old woman pushed the door open and shouted, "Hey, what are you humming? That nonsense poem is the reason we can't go outside. Don't you ever let it come out of your mouth again. Not one more time, understand?" The girl immediately fell silent and bowed her head. "I'm sorry." Ro jolted awake. He found himself lying on a small bed, his body covered in wounds. He sat up and asked, "Where is this?" Look cried out joyfully, "You're awake." She said, "This is the Assessment Bureau's infirmary." "Ro, you've been asleep all day." He asked again, "All day?" Look nodded. "Yeah, you slept like someone switched you off." The doctor said, "It seems you've accumulated too much mental fatigue. I don't know what burdens you're carrying, but aren't you rushing things?" Ro suddenly recalled Loud's phantom blades. He had been felled by that technique and then blacked out. Ro pondered for a moment and replied, "Maybe you're right." Look watched him for a long moment, then leaned in and asked, "Ro, I have something important to tell you. Do you happen to know what mantras are?" Ro answered, "No." Look explained, "Mantras are a special way of using prana. Only certain races can use them, and many top masters know how to use them." He suddenly asked, "Is Loud one of them too?" Look nodded, "Yes, he's a warrior of the Brower Ward clan." The Brower Ward are a combat-oriented race, skilled hunters who live in the southern swamps. Because the chants are traditionally passed down orally as poetry within the clan, they're called mantras. They're also tied to heredity, so they're often very difficult to master after adulthood. Ro heard of the mantras for the first time. Look emphasized particularly Loudsan. It sounds like you also possess a mantra. Ro, do you have any clues? He searched his memory. Any clue at all? The girl from his earlier dream had been humming a passage of verse as well. He replied, I think so. Look said excitedly, great. A mantra is an invaluable asset for a master. I'm even more convinced of that. Ro, you could become a top ranker. She opened her ranktel and babbled on. So, I found the perfect quest for you, Ro. The Azaban Forest Investigation Quest is an ecological survey of a forest that became a rank 48 danger zone 2 months ago. Ro asked curiously, if it's an ecological survey, don't I just investigate the wildlife and such? Look answered, that's part of it, but actually, recently people have been disappearing from that forest one after another. Adventurers who took similar quests vanished without a trace, one by one. At first they were level 1,000 people, but lately even adventurers ranked in the hundreds have disappeared. If you can find the cause of the disappearances, by my estimate you could easily climb 200 ranks. You're currently 2729 and could move up to around 2,500. Though the risk will be much greater. Ro stood up at once. I'll take that quest. She introduced it to me because she thought I could do it, right? Look said confidently, of course. Then we need to carry out the paperwork and accept the quest immediately. She explained further, just so you know, in Azaban Forest there are species banned from hunting and restricted zones. With me here it should be fine, but Ro, you should still be careful. He suddenly asked, what if I don't comply? Look admonished sternly, your rank will be lowered. No matter your skills, if you carelessly damage the ecosystem or repeatedly fail quests, your adventurer reputation will collapse. Your rank is your credibility. Ro replied, I understand. The girl quickly operated the system. Okay, quest accepted. Look said excitedly, Ro, this quest is your fresh start. It's the first step to skyrocketing up the adventurer rankings. Let's both do our best. He gave a small smile, yeah. Scene change. Azaban Forest? Wild and dense. Dalkan was eliminating a small adventurer because the man had seen him break the rules. He squeezed the other's throat, growling in fury, so the man couldn't do anything with what he'd seen. A guy standing nearby exclaimed, you're killing again? Dalkan replied, so what? The assessment bureau doesn't even bother watching. It's all low-rank trash anyway. He looked at the animal cage. Then he stomped once on the lid beam and rumbled. Anyway, trying to climb the ranks honestly sounds stupid. Dalkan sat down, looked at the small white-furred creature, and grinned with satisfaction. A white Kirin, huh? Just selling this creature's horn alone would catapult me into the triple digits instantly. The steel-bearded man said calmly, strength alone isn't enough to raise your adventurer rank. I exist for people who have to endure injustices like this, he continued. He's Rasocruel, number 7 on the smuggler rankings. Dalkan replied arrogantly, as if I'd give up such a prime hunting ground. He laughed loudly and declared, I'll break into the top 100. Dalkan Iris, ranked 672 on the adventurer leaderboard. Ro and Look approached the entrance to Azaban Forest. The gatekeeper said, I need to check your rank. Ro presented his card. The man examined it carefully. Adventurer rank, 2728. I see you're allowed in. The gate opened. The two of them stepped inside, and Ro suddenly asked, this may be redundant, but how many people are on the adventurer leaderboard? Look answered, roughly 30,000, though only about 20,000 are actively participating. Even so, this is an incomparable hell compared to other leaderboards. They say the adventurer rankings are on a completely different level, even numerically. Ro was a bit surprised. Completely different even in numbers? Look explained, for example, someone in the 4-digit range on the adventurer leaderboard would be equivalent to the 3-digit range on other leaderboards. That's why the quality of the adventurer rankings is so high. So a 3-digit rank adventurer would correspond to a 2-digit rank elsewhere. They'd be stronger than the 2 opponents you faced in the recent exam. Ro exclaimed, the standards are really high. Look looked at him with hopeful eyes, all right. The girl shouted, now the adventure begins. Azaban Forest. Ranked danger zone level 48. As Ro stepped in, he immediately sensed something was off. Seeing his expression, Look asked, what's wrong? Ro? He answered, this is not an ordinary forest. The girl laughed and said, you noticed too. She laughed again, you spotted it. They say a veteran explorer can tell at a glance how dangerous a place is. Look added that ordinary people have no way to know that. That's why the Danger Zone leaderboard exists. The reason Azaban Forest was added to the Danger Zone rankings 2 months ago is simple. A large-scale monster outbreak. As she spoke, a swarm of insects and mutated beasts suddenly lunged at the pair. Look yelled, Ro, you have to protect me properly. He calmly drew his sword. Leave it to me. Then she leapt to attack them. Her swordsmanship was precise. One slash taking out several monsters. An eagle dove down from above. Ro met it with a clean single slash. Alone, he fought all around, the mutated beasts falling like wheat before the scythe. The insects, seeing this, turned and fled. Look asked, was that a technique Adel taught you? Ro replied slowly, yes. I've learned a few techniques from Adel, but there are still many I can't use yet, he said, gripping his sword. I think I'm about to be able to use the second move. A giant monster suddenly appeared. It was a Brad Orc, a danger rank 126 monster. It looked at Ro with eyes blazing, roaring ferociously. He said cautiously, I should just test it. Ro channeled his chi. Prana surged powerfully down the path. A lotus bloom, light flooded the area. Ro struck 2 consecutive slashes at the monster. But strangely, the Brad Orc stood rooted, not the least bit wounded. Ro and Look froze. The creature immediately counterattacked. Both ran for their lives. Ro said, it's a failure. Look shouted, what are you doing? He replied, I thought it would work. I didn't expect the opponent to be this strong. The girl warned, don't forget your duty to protect my life. They ran for a while when suddenly Look froze. She cried out in panic, Ro, it's a cliff. He said, jump. Look gasped in surprise. She had barely shouted wait when she felt herself lifted into the air. Ro grabbed her and jumped down the cliff. Look screamed, oh my god. Ro remained extremely calm. They fell onto a large tree canopy. Thanks to his years of forest experience, Ro easily leapt along the branches and landed safely. Look was dazed, her thoughts a jumble. He set the girl down and exhaled with relief. Look, just recovering, yelled, what do you mean exhaled? If you're gonna do that, give me a heads up. Ro said nonchalantly, sorry, Adel's training is mostly like that. It's become a habit. The girl found it hard to believe. Really? What kind of training did you endure? Ro felt something strange. This place was. Look observed for a moment, then said cheerfully, we're in luck. This is the target survey area. After Azaban Forest was ranked a danger zone, the ecosystem survey had to be redone. About 80% of the survey was complete, but 20% remained to be handled. That 20% is right here, the spot where the large-scale monster outbreak occurred. Sure enough, this area had a diverse flora and fauna, with creatures of strange shapes. Seeing him stunned, Look called, Ro. He said, the plants and animals here are things I've never seen before. At that moment he realized, this was an adventure. Yuna's excited smile from years ago flashed in his mind. Ro, come with me. Let's go on an adventure. The adventure Yuna had always longed for. The rustle of footsteps on the grass cut through his thoughts. Ro drew his sword. Look suddenly stopped him. Wait. A white Kirin with a sharp horn stepped out, its snowy coat trembling all over, painfully weak. She exclaimed, this mutant beast is a rare species. Look stepped closer to it. Ro asked in surprise, shouldn't I take it down? She opened her rank tell to check and said, absolutely not. The white Kirin is a rare grade for mutant beast, on the brink of extinction. She looked at the Kirin's leg, took off the pouch at her side and said, it's injured. Let me handle it. Ro was a bit surprised. You know how to treat injuries? Look replied, rankers often get hurt, so I learned basic medicine. When Loud beat you badly, I patched you up then. She bandaged the creature, then told Ro, let's set up a temporary base here today. As an appraiser, I can't abandon this little one. He agreed, all right. Suddenly Look loudly explained, for the record, protecting the white Kirin is like conducting an ecological survey, don't get me wrong. It's not that I value it over you or anything. Ro waved his hand. It's fine, I understand. That night, beside a large campfire under the trees, Look slept soundly next to the white Kirin. Ro stood not far away, practicing swordsmanship. He channeled chi, focused prana into his blade, then executed the move. Zhong Lianhua. Ro struck 2 consecutive slashes into a large tree trunk. A considerable amount of prana was deployed and the blows hit their mark. But for some reason the damage inflicted was negligible. Ro wiped his sweat. It's useless. He still couldn't use the move. He lay down on the ground, placed his sword to one side, and stretched his arms out. Ro suddenly remembered Loud's illusion sword display, and his warning. Don't underestimate the adventure rankings. The martial arts of the Broward clan, spearmanship, meditation. Ro told himself he was completely powerless. With his current strength, he couldn't perform a divine reversal. He had to become stronger. He suddenly sat bolt upright. Look had said Loud mentioned you also possess an art. Ro looked at his hands. An art? Huh? The next morning, Ro was leaning against a tree dozing, when he suddenly heard Look cry out. Whoa. Ro hurriedly asked, what's wrong? She said in alarm, it's thrashing wildly all of a sudden. He looked at the creature. It's better now, not as weak and exhausted as yesterday. Look analyzed. White Kirins have very high regenerative abilities, so with proper treatment they'll heal quickly. It's still a juvenile, so it's normally very friendly toward humans. This wariness, as I suspect, that wound looks like it was inflicted by humans. Ro was a bit surprised. By humans? She pointed to the wound on the horn. Take a close look at this horn. See the chipped areas? It looks like it was attacked by poachers. The horn of the white Kirin is a panacea, so they used to be hunted in large numbers. That's why the species was classified as rare. Even though hunting is now banned, demand remains, so they're still poached. In the underworld, they're traded under the name Kirin. Suddenly, the creature roared loudly. Seeing its aggression, Look was frightened. Huh? The white Kirin charged at the girl. Ro raised his sword to block the horn aimed at Look. Although it tried to butt with great force, it couldn't advance another step. Seeing Ro's cold gaze, the white Kirin panicked and turned to flee into the forest. Look shouted, "What? No." He scratched his head and said, "I scared it off. You planning to chase after it?" Look quickly answered, "Yeah, even if it's recovered, it's certainly not fully well yet. Besides, so far there's been no information about white Kirins appearing in Azaban Forest. So chasing this one is part of the ecological survey." She said this as she pulled on a t-shirt. Hearing that, Ro quickly put on his protective gear and grabbed his weapon. He looked in the direction the white Kirin ran and said, "I'll go ahead." Look warned, "Be careful, Ro. There might be poachers in this forest." He suddenly asked, "If I find a poacher, what should I do? If I defeat them, will my rank increase?" Look replied, "It depends on the opponent's strength, but it's possible." Ro shot off like a rocket. "I got it. I'll take down as many as I can." He quickly chased after the white Kirin, but it was too fast. He lost sight of it. It ran this way. Ro was running when suddenly an arrow flew toward him. Ro dodged to the side just in time. The arrow slammed into the ground at his feet. Immediately, a sword-wielding man charged out, shouting, "Unlucky for you, poacher, because we're furious right now." He raised his sword and attacked fiercely. Ro dodged while launching a quick counterattack. The opponent saw the pale blue light that looked familiar and thought, "This prana color." He raised his hand and shouted, "Wait, stop." Ro was extremely surprised. This voice. There was another kid up in a tree. He suddenly asked, "Hey, who is it?" Both called out in unison, "Eddie, it's Owl." A few days earlier, right after the adventurer ranking exam, at the appraisal bureau Trikista branch, Owl went to the registration counter and said, "I want to take a commission." The clerk asked, "What level commission do you want?" He replied, "Adventurer rank commission." Just then, Eddie came running up breathlessly. "Hello, I'm here to accept a commission." The two men were a bit surprised to see each other. After a moment of sizing each other up with dagger-like glances, they both spoke at once. "Hey, you go first." "No, you go first." Eddie sighed and went first. "Have you investigated the swordsman who beat us yet?" Owl looked dejected. "Well, I couldn't dig up any information. Hard to believe, but it seems he's never appeared on any ranking." Eddie fell silent for a moment, then said, "I'm called a genius on the archer's ranking, but because of that bastard, my pride was wounded. Overwhelmingly defeated by a nobody with no rank." Hearing this, Owl's expression darkened. He remembered the night before when, returning to the base, Mandy asked, "Captain, you've worked hard. How did the adventurer ranking go?" He replied indifferently, "I've registered." Pick cheered excitedly, "That's our captain for you. Now we can expand our operations." Curious blonde Lala, "The captain must have made the other candidates suffer a lot, right?" Owl replied, "No." The others laughed loudly. "You could say it was pure misery. Actually, isn't the hardest part restraining your own power?" Mandy insisted, "No way a third-tier mercenary with a double-digit rank would lose to some rookie." The moment he heard that, Owl slammed his fist down on the table with a bang. The table split in two. The lackeys jumped and froze. "Captain." Owl ground his teeth and shouted, that guy, he didn't even bother to look at me, as if I were nothing more than a common stepping stone." He ordered, "Starting tomorrow, triple the training load." The picks gaped. "Triple?" Lala suddenly said, "Now that we're registered on the adventurer rankings, we'll be able to take commissions we couldn't before." Owl clenched his fists. "That's still not enough. This world is bigger than we thought. I'll retrain seriously from scratch." It was a shock to him. Owl told Eddie, "My pride has been cracked like that. I didn't plan to focus on the adventurer rankings, but I can't stay like this forever." Eddie looked down and sighed. "My adventurer rank is 6,725. Owl replied, "I'm 6301. As for Ro Tully, the one who beat us, he's ranked 2728. Eddie said confidently, "The gap's about 4,000 ranks. It's just a matter of moments." Owl agreed, "We have the same goal, except a commission." Both stepped up to the registration counter. Eddie said a forest just got added to the danger list. Owl asked, "Azaban Forest, right? The more dangerous the area, the easier it is to climb the ranks." And so the three of them clashed in Azaban Forest. Ro stared at his opponents, not sure what to do next, when suddenly he heard the panicked scream of the white Kirin. Ro immediately sheathed his sword and shouted, "We'll talk later," and sprinted off. Eddie immediately followed, asking, "A wounded white Kirin showed up? I thought poachers were chasing it. You're gonna protect that spirit beast, right?" Ro replied, "Yeah." He thought to himself, that kid really runs fast. Eddie said, "When moving through the forest, it's best to use the uneven terrain." He put force into his ankles like this. Suddenly Eddie accelerated. overtaking Ro. He shouted and sped up to keep pace. Eddie abruptly turned and said, "Is being attacked by a monster." Before the two of them was a giant beast. Long tentacles protruding from its maw coiled tightly around the white Kirin. Ro moved to approach, but a tentacle of the monster lashed out first, and he immediately cut through the large tentacle. Ro studied the opponent carefully and decided he couldn't get close, so he'd launch a single slashing strike. That wouldn't work either. The white Kirin is tightly bound and would be hit as well. Ro suddenly asked Eddie, "Can you create a distraction for the monster?" Eddie blurted, "How can I suddenly lure it?" Suddenly Al shouted, "Eddie, aim for its eyes." Ro, "Keep running." Both obeyed immediately and took up combat positions. Ro charged in for close combat while Eddie fired 2 arrows. Thud thud. Both arrows struck the monster's eyes, making it howl in agony. Al directed Ro aim for both of its legs. He leapt to one side, raised his sword, and delivered a powerful slash. The beast thrashed and roared miserably, spitting out its prey. Al shouted, "Take the white Kirin and run." Ro scooped up the small creature and jumped aside while he chopped down a large tree, kicking it over so it fell onto the giant beast. Ro was surprised by how agile he was. Eddie praised, "Not bad. Good command." Al replied casually, "I'm used to directing subordinates," and the other snapped, "Who's your subordinate?" Ro stood in thought for a moment, silently recalling the appraiser's earlier words. "Top 10 on the adventurer rankings, your swordsmanship is excellent, but just with that skill you still made the top 10. Ro told himself that swordsmanship alone wasn't enough. To climb the adventurer rankings, he needed to learn things beyond swordplay. Look ran up breathlessly, the girl panting, "Ro, sorry I'm late," but what met her eyes was a rather calm scene. 3 people sat on a large tree trunk while the white Kirin stood watching them warily. Look exclaimed, "No, what the hell is going on?" Ro recounted what had happened. The girl said, "So you thought we were poachers?" And Ro added that the misunderstanding was quickly resolved. Look replied evenly that although it was settled quickly, suddenly attacking like that was unacceptable. "I should report it to the rankings," she said. Hearing that, Eddie and Al both jumped. She straightened her face and said she was joking, since they stopped her in time, but next time she would really report it. Al broke out in a cold sweat. Got it," Eddie said softly. "I'll be more careful." Al suddenly asked quietly, "Hey, why are you carrying special identification equipment?" Ro answered, "I heard using it makes it easier to rank up," and he glanced at Look. "Ranking up is easy, but in return you'll be monitored constantly. No profession is as rigid as the identifiers. Just going back and forth between villages takes a whole day." Ro replied, "But probably that won't happen." Eddie insisted, "No, I'm just being used for convenience." He asked again, "Do you know why the identifiers want to be the exclusive ones? Because only then can they get promoted. Identifier promotions are based on ranking update achievements. In other words, someone like you who climbs the ranks fast is prime prey. Be careful, the woman's just using you as a stepping stone to get promoted." Ro muttered, "Promoted?" He suddenly remembered Look's words from their first meeting. "I have something I must do." Ro wondered whether getting promoted was really something she had to do. She didn't look like it. Look climbed onto the big trunk and scanned the area. So the royal horn is still safe. The small beast suddenly sidled up and rubbed against Look's leg, and she turned to play with it. Seeing this, Ro said, "Looks like you two have become friends." Look replied, "Not exactly friends, this place just seems to be the only safe spot." Owl scolded, "Ungrateful wolf." Eddie grumbled, "Not cute at all," and Look frowned, snapping that it was afraid of them for that reason. Owl protested, "I didn't do anything," as the girl picked up the white Kirin and jumped down. Then suddenly said, "Ro gives off a very intimidating aura." He was a bit puzzled. What aura? Look looked at the beast sprawled beneath the large log and said, "I've been curious since earlier. The spirit beast, it really is an aquiline spirit." Owl exclaimed that it was a spirit beast they had never seen before. Look sat down to examine it closely, saying the species lives in colder regions, so that made sense. Of course, it had never been recorded in the Azaban forest before. She took out her rank tell to enter the data. "Ro, record the existence of this spirit beast." He agreed, "Do it." After finishing, Look asked, "We came to this forest on an ecological survey commission. What about you two?" Al hesitated. "We also, kind of the same thing," and Eddie laughed awkwardly, "Right, we were commissioned by the appraisal bureau." Look watched the two of them closely. She thought to herself that a commission? What commission concerning the Azaban forest would require hiring mercenaries and archers? Suddenly, an idea flashed through Look's mind. "I get it. Influenced by Ro, you accepted those adventure rank commissions, didn't you?" She stood up, pretending to pat the white Kirin's head, and said Ro should sober up. Look suddenly said, "Right. Ro, I have good news for you. Your sword speed ranking has been updated." She held up her rank tell for him to see. "The Kenseru Ryu move you use is astonishingly fast. I submitted it and it was approved. Look, the data updated. Ro Tully, Adventurer rank 27-28. Sword speed rank 26. Ro was genuinely astonished. Jumping from rank 58 to 26, Look said excitedly that everyone above him were masters of lightning-fast draws. Well, happy? He replied softly, I am pleased, yes. That move is almost invisible to the naked eye, yet you recognized it, Look admitted frankly. It was intuition, I'm an identifier after all. I at least know that much. Seeing his face still thoughtful, she asked again, what's the matter? Ro blurted, are you some kind of extraordinary person or what? She lowered her head and chuckled. Hee. Then she cried out loud. You only just realized? Al stepped forward and asked which category increased. Eddie exclaimed, I'm curious too. Look asked Ro if he could show them. Ro replied casually, sure. Al looked at the screen, his face hardening. This bastard had beat him up before. Eddie glanced as well, muttering that numbers were a hassle. Suddenly Ro had an idea. He said to Owl and Eddie, I want to ask you two something. Teach me strengths beyond swordsmanship. After a moment's talk, Eddie said, I see. Up until now I've only trained in swordsmanship. I admit that, so earlier, Eddie's movements helped me a lot. When moving through the woods you should use the uneven terrain, he nodded. Even so, I didn't expect you to mimic my moves instantly. Ro added, and Owl's guidance too. Owl answered candidly, those things are ingrained in my instincts, partly because of my current position. After all, I'm the leader of a mercenary group. I need to plan to avoid losing my men. In group combat, formation and order matter. Who stands where, who delivers the finishing blow, work backward from that. I'll ask seriously, are you really interested in this stuff? Your swordsmanship is already extremely strong. You probably don't need our advice, right? Ro replied, no, I do need it. Tell me more. The two of them looked at each other for a moment, then decided to share their experience with Ro. When moving through a forest, first engage all 5 senses. I'll show you some coordination tips. Start with front and rear lines. Look sat to the side listening to the conversation. She thought Ro was trying to change, and that making him fight loud had been a wise decision. Look looked at the aquiline spirit beast, doubt rising in her chest. With poachers showing up and countless unidentified spirit beasts, what was happening? There were too many unanswered questions in the Azaban forest right now. She suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. This mission might be beyond our capabilities. Not far away, Dalkin Iris was casting a spell to search for the White Kirin. Seeing Ro and his group standing so close to the beast, he was a bit surprised. Rosso asked, what's going on? Dalkin replied cheerfully, while tracking the runaway Kirin, I ran into a few kids. Rosso looked excited. Kids are perfect. Their organs are still fresh and can fetch a high price. Dalkin calculated aloud that while they weren't as valuable as the Kirin, they might as well catch them too. If you dare step into a beast's territory, getting ripped apart is to be expected. He grinned with a sinister smile, his eyes full of killing intent. At that moment Eddie was still going on and on, explaining that using all 5 senses wasn't easy. Vision and hearing are obvious, but smell and even taste all need to be trained to be usable in combat. Ro replied, I understand. Then this forest is an ideal training ground. The sense of plants and animals here are very concentrated. Owl suddenly said he really couldn't tell. Eddie explained that a mercenary used to the stench of blood would have trouble. Right now I can pinpoint exactly how many beasts are around us. He said, use your prana. Think of prana as a kind of fluid talent. Focus your awareness on the sense you want to sharpen, and you will perceive it. Ro closed his eyes and concentrated his awareness. Prana radiated, growing stronger and stronger, to the point Eddie had to shout that he still needed to control it. Owl was amazed. Such a large amount. Terrifying. Ro thought to himself that he had to make every sense razor-sharp like a blade. He pressed his focus deeper and detected on a high rocky outcrop. A strange surge of power had appeared, a grotesque face staring in their direction. Ro jolted. He drew his sword instantly into a fighting stance. Look was a bit surprised. What's wrong? Ro? He said. Someone's watching us very close. Before he finished speaking, a sky-shattering punch struck Ro squarely. It sent him flying backward dozens of yards. The whole group gasped in horror. Look shouted, Ro, are you okay? He struggled to his feet, his body covered in dirt. Dalkin stepped forward and shouted, who let prana leak everywhere like this? Disgusting, because of you it lunged straight at me. Eddie and Owl immediately took defensive stances. You bastard! Who are you? Look recognized the newcomer. She suddenly yelled, you two don't fight. This one is Dalkin Iris, an adventurer ranked 672. Owl was startled, a 3-digit ranked adventurer. Eddie paled, he's stronger than us now. He answered arrogantly, so you've heard of me. Look loudly added, with my career I was fairly famous too. Just before hitting the double digits I committed a crime and plummeted in rank. Like an idiot. At that moment Rosso finally caught up. He was panting heavily and bent over. Dalkin, you're too fast. Dalkin corrected him, you're just slow. Seeing Look, Rosso exclaimed, There's even an appraiser here? Well, I don't care who you are, Look suddenly said, Rosso cruel. He was surprised and blinked wide-eyed. The girl shouted loudly, rank 76 on the smuggling leaderboard. Rosso lightly stroked his curled beard and chuckled. Not bad knowledge. You even know the criminal leaderboard. The criminal leaderboard, the ranking within the underworld, reflects the severity of a person's crimes. Famous lists include serial killers. The higher a thief ranks, the deeper their descent into depravity. The criminal leaderboard is informal. Users create rankings outside the Bureau's control. High-quality lists are sometimes bought by the Bureau if they're not unethical. Once purchased, fans continue updating them regularly. Dalkin's gaze flicked to the side. The Kirin. Oh, there it is. He grinned lecherously. That's the one we've been looking for. The white Kirin hid behind a small tree, as if it sensed the danger from this man. Look put out her hand to block his path. She shouted, Dalkin, why are you running with that man? He replied nonchalantly, obviously for the money. She pressed, you only teamed up with him for money? With your skills, you could earn money legitimately. Dalkin said, don't be so quick to judge. Money isn't my only goal. I partnered with him for 2 reasons, to sell things to him and to buy things from him. Look was puzzled. Buy? Dalkin sneered arrogantly, you know about this appraiser, that leaderboard? If you truly crave it, you can outright buy it. Look understood his meaning and clenched her fists in anger. How dare you, insulting the rankings right in front of an appraiser. At that moment, Owl suddenly launched a surprise attack from behind. Dalkin easily stopped it with his hand and scoffed, what are these kids trying to do? Eddie raised his bow and replied loudly, our duty is to patrol Azaban Forest. We can't let a dangerous man like you walk around freely. Dalkin clicked his tongue. What a nuisance. Deal with them as usual. He gathered his chi. Prana radiated terribly, filling the space. Dalkin grabbed Owl's blade and squeezed so hard the sword shattered. He unleashed an insanely powerful punch straight at Owl. Die. He was secretly terrified. No. Am I about to die? At that moment, a pale blue prana stormed in like a tempest. Who the hell do you think you are? That's my question to ask. In the blink of an eye, a deafening explosion ripped and shook violently through the forest. The 2 sides clashed, one blue, one purple, neither giving ground. Ro's expression tensed. He held his sword and stared straight at his opponent. Opposite him, the curly-haired man named Dalkin grinned and tightened his stance to attack. Immediately, the appraiser looked beside Ro shouted worriedly, Lo, are you still okay? A murderous gleam appeared in his eyes. He replied faintly and hesitantly, yeah, but is this guy a poacher? Dalkin's lips curled slightly, and suddenly his fingers twitched as if excited. Look glanced at his movements. The girl fell silent to ponder for a moment, then said, I've been searching for it all this time. Yes, there's no doubt about it. Hearing her, Ro raised his sword and pointed it straight at the opponent. Using the move Whirlwind, he swung a green blade directly at Dalkin. Before he could evade, a thunderous blast rang out. Under the faint chains binding him, he quickly showed his strength, slashing them apart and roaring, that kid is using prana? Instinctively, Ro frowned and concluded in silence, stubborn. My strike missed. Immediately he recalled the mountain climbing episode with a man who had warned him, Lo, be careful when facing someone who knows how to use prana. You're a special case. Normally you must reach master level in some field to obtain prana. When he was small, Ro climbed a cliff and looked up at the man, asking a master. The man's expression was very serious. In a hoarse voice he explained, sword, weapons, or anything. You awaken latent power through deep, devoted study. That's prana. In other words, if someone has perceived prana. With that he used force to climb that towering rock face right before Ro. He placed his foot on the peak, his hand touched down with a smack. On the towering summit Ro tilted his head to look at him, sunset lighting his back. Under the faint chains binding him, he quickly showed his strength, slashing them apart and roaring, that kid is using prana? Unconsciously, Ro frowned. He concluded silently, stubborn. My attack didn't land. At once he remembered the mountain climb with a man who had warned him, Lo, be careful when confronting someone who can use prana. You're a special case. Normally you must reach master level in some discipline to obtain prana. When he was small, Ro climbed the cliff and looked up at the man, asking a master. The man's face was extremely serious. He rasped an explanation. Sword, weapons, or anything. One awakens latent power through profound, wholehearted study. That is prana. In other words, if someone has become aware of prana. After saying this, he used his strength to climb that towering rock face right in front of Ro. He planted his foot on the summit. His hand hit down with a thud. On the towering peak, Ro looked up at him. Behind the man the sunset glowed. He held out his hand and spoke in a low voice, They very well might be masters in some field. Ro's face filled with doubt and confusion at the man's words. Before that hazy memory, he gripped his cold, sharp sword tightly. Suddenly, look at the corner hurriedly warned him to be on guard. Lo, watch out. Dalkan is ranked 12th in boxing. Ro's eyes flicked to the girl. He muttered, rank 12. The girl, scrolling her phone, mentioned quietly, he's also ranked 4th in beast taming, 19 in arm strength, and 7th in weightlifting. As she finished, Look's face went pale. The girl spoke louder, his strength is world-class. Don't get near him. At some point Dalkan had stepped close to the girl and snapped irritably, spouting someone else's stats like this. It's maddening when there's a scribe nearby. Looks like I'll crush you first. He stood beside a tree and used his magic to rip the trunk free. At that moment Look's face filled with fear and panic. The tall tree trunk was lifted by Dalkan and aimed straight at the girl. His face brimmed with glee. With a sneer he said, die. With that he hurled the tree trunk directly at Look's figure. While the girl was still stunned, Ro immediately darted to her side and stopped the tree trunk. His expression changed. He silently frowned and ground his teeth in anger, then heaved the trunk upward with his own strength. That throw sent Ro skidding back a considerable distance. Look looked down at him and called anxiously, Lo. He gasped for breath and rose to his feet, his gaze cold as he stared straight ahead. At that moment, someone watching the two of them uttered a puzzled, huh? He stood beside curly-haired Dalkan and asked with curiosity, your prana is strange. He was Raso, one of the smugglers. Stroking his beard, he replied with a sly smile, Dalkan, capture this one. He'll fetch a high price. Hearing that, Dalkan raised an eyebrow, pleased. If you say so, it must be true. I'll take him, as planned, 1-1 of course, if he survives. Suddenly, a boy perched on a high branch watched their movements. He notched an arrow and muttered, better not forget about us. Dalkan heard the high twang of arrows firing in succession. He turned, scoffed, and glanced over. He used the power in his arm, infused with prana, to block the arrows. His face lit with excitement as he stared at the boy and asked irritably, are you worth remembering? Under that cold gaze, Eddie shivered and stood frozen. Suddenly another person appeared and hurriedly tossed a bomb in front of the two of them. Dalkan turned around in suspicion. The man was Owl, leader of the Red Wolf troop, his face unervingly calm. He urged, now one push him back. Through the thick black smoke, Dalkan shouted angrily, don't toy with me, one, I'll wipe you out. Having said that, he slammed a heavy palm toward Owl. He cracked the surroundings. Beside Raso, confusion made him step back. Explosions thundered into the distance. Birds flapped away in a panic. After the black smoke cleared, Dalkan frowned in puzzlement. Huh? He surveyed the wreckage around him and replied irritably, they got away. Just then Raso brushed off his coat as he walked and warned, Dalkan, that was too dangerous. He teased, what if you die? In a flash, everyone on the protagonist's side hurried away. Owl carried Look on his back and glanced at Eddie with approval. Impressive one, you got my meaning. The boy ran and replied, strength alone can't beat him. I think the best course is for everyone to withdraw. Ro kept close behind the others. He hugged the white Kirin and ran without answering. He pondered Look's words. That guy is ranked 672nd on the adventure leaderboard. How could someone that strong be down at rank 600? Ro hugged it to his chest and took a steadying breath. Suddenly the white Kirin leapt to the ground and gave a low, warning growl. King. Ro stopped, faced it and said, sorry. Continued to growl a warning. They stopped well away from the forest. Owl gently set Look down on his back and said, we're here now, one, it should be fine. At that moment, the girl looked straight at Ro's face and said seriously, Lo, it seems there's still one more thing to do. Russo cruel, he must capture him. Ro's face filled with doubt and confusion. He repeated, Russo cruel. That bearded guy? The two imagined a blonde name. Look nodded, that bearded one. He looked at the girl innocently and asked, why do we have to capture him? After a moment, the girl fumbled for an answer. Look lowered her eyes and said sadly, because of my own objective. Seeing Look's expression, Ro fell silent and did not answer. Just then Owl beside him cut off his train of thought coolly. Hey, I don't know what she's talking about, but shouldn't we decide what to do next? Look glanced at him, flustered, and said, you're right. She adjusted her hat and murmured, sorry, Lo, I was too hasty. Ro continued to watch her. He didn't respond for a moment. Instantly Owl dispelled the awkward atmosphere and offered his opinion. As I said before, our mission is to patrol the Azavan forest. Eddie looked up at him and replied, I've already reported it. Owl continued, if we're going to keep tailing those two. Look's expression returned to normal. She gently reminded them, as an official agent, I'll be blunt. You two have no chance of beating them. Owl folded his arms and hesitated. I know, so we'll just observe. The two kept talking. Once we expose their crimes, We'll report to the bureau and let them handle the rest. Even so, it's dangerous. That's precisely why we're doing this. I'm ranked 6,000 among adventurers. Eddie blurted, startled, glaring at Owl. He muttered, this guy. Owl calmly continued the strategy discussion. What if we actually pull this off? Seeing he wouldn't heed her advice, Look touched her hat and sighed. You're impressive. After a moment, she stated seriously, with high stealth and tracking scores, plus this forest ranking 48th on the danger list, depending on the intel's reliability, you could climb at least 1,000 ranks. Al smirked smugly, all right. Beside him, Eddie exclaimed excitedly, now I've got motivation. Look put her hands on her hips and warned them sternly. Just don't do anything reckless. He nodded in agreement. Okay, I said we wouldn't fight. We don't intend to do anything rash. What about you two? The girl glanced at Ro. He replied quietly, us. He looked at them as Look continued, we want to take the royal horn somewhere safe. They looked down at the white Kirin and replied indifferently, good idea. It's hard to fight with the royal horn nearby. Dalkin's targeting that kid. Keeping it close only increases the risk of an ambush. Ro slowly stepped closer to them, touched his hair and sighed. No, that's not it. I just don't want the royal horn dragged into this anymore. With that, he reached out to touch the white Kirin's fur. Look sat down beside it and stroked its fur, smiling. It must be terrified of us. The plan's set, Owl said coolly. Then we'll split up for now. After you get the royal horn to safety, meet under that tall tree. Nana or Eddie will be there each night. Ro looked at him puzzled. For what? He calmly explained. Just in case of emergency, we might need each other. Immediately Eddie awkwardly offered help. Lo, before we part, let me show you how to move through this forest. He replied helplessly, thanks. After a moment, Owl urged the boy, hey, if we dawdle, Dalkin might slip away. Up ahead, the boy waved him on. You go ahead, wherever you are, I'll find you. After speaking, Eddie gently explained, listen up, while Owl just frowned irritably at the boy. The three of them in the triangle-shaped group chatted calmly. Can you teach me more of your tactics? I thought you were in a hurry. Shut up, just a little longer and I'll go. Time was tight, and the two of them guided Ro quickly. He watched them and said, there's a lot to learn. Really? Owl didn't hesitate to make a request. Not sure if this counts as tuition, but can I borrow that dagger? My sword's broken. Ro hurriedly pulled the dagger from his pocket and handed it over. Sure, as long as you don't mind using a hunting blade. For the last time, they said their goodbyes. Before you sleep, practice visualization a bit. It'll raise your success rate a lot. Review it once a day. Okay? Thanks, you too. By then, Look had bonded with the white Kirin. She looked at Ro and murmured with a smile, all right, then. Let's get the royal horn to safety. At last, we can resume the ecological survey we were assigned. Dalkin's still a concern, but we have a duty to finish this task. You get what I mean, right, Lo? Ro looked at her blankly and nodded. Seeing his composed face, she repeated seriously, are you sure? He gave his habitual non-committal Then Ro said in a low voice, I trust Owl and Eddie. If it's them, they'll pull it off. Honestly, they might even be better than me. Hearing that, Look replied, their skills are impressive. You're right, we can trust them. Suddenly she raised a finger and proposed. Then I have a suggestion. Why don't we try to find the royal horn's home while we're surveying? I've wondered where it came from. There might be others like it out there. If that place seems safe, we could even leave it there. Ro looked down at Look and asked thoughtfully, but how would we find that place? She touched the white Kirin's fur and said excitedly, we just ask it. Hey, sweetie. Where do you want to go? After a moment, it sensed something. It gave a warning growl and then bolted off in one direction. Look saw this and said, looks like that's the way. The two ran close behind the white Kirin and replied in low voices. Really? Trust its instinct to find its way home. The royal horn is very smart. Look's eyes were full of confidence as she declared, it was terrified earlier. If it's still just a kid, of course it wants to go home. Ro stared ahead and hesitated. That actually makes sense. Suddenly she pointed at a creature sitting on a branch and shouted excitedly. Another unidentified animal. Lo, note it down. He quickly pulled out his notebook and replied. Got it. Ro finished sketching the monkey's face and thought to himself. This is right. Isn't it? Then Look pointed at a deer and said, Lo, there's another one. He glanced up and answered lazily. She grumbled, you don't need to respond to every single one. Lo, there's one over there, he said indifferently. Night fell and everyone rested together in one spot. The white Kirin lay by the fire to ward off the forest chill. The fire crackled fiercely. Ro walked away to enjoy some solitude. He took a deep breath and relaxed his whole body. Then he quickly released Prada. Power surged outward everywhere. Suddenly Look stepped forward and called to him, Lo. Ro glanced at her and replied, Look. She let her hair fall over her shoulders and exclaimed, am I bothering you? He answered casually, no, I'm just reviewing what Eddie taught me. So you're still up? After a moment, Look handed him the notes with a smile and said, I just read the report you wrote. Your drawings are awful. You definitely need to improve that, but I'll let it slide for now. Try to be more concise. I'm only offering objective feedback. While she examined Ro's sketch, she heard him call. Look. He said he wanted to capture Russo for his own goal, which startled Look. He kept a calm expression and asked seriously, is that goal the thing you said you absolutely had to do? The girl fidgeted her fingers anxiously and whispered a single syllable. Ro looked across at Look and affirmed, I'll help you. The girl looked skeptical. Huh? As he walked, he reminded her, staying up late like this feels like if you sit still it'll all explode out of you, right? I know that feeling very well. Look opened her eyes wide in surprise, holding back annoyance as she said, you really understand? You make it sound like nothing. Suddenly she snapped to something and fell silent. After a moment she ran up to Ro and asked suspiciously, is that why you train late every night? He replied coldly, Hearing his confirmation, Look's face turned self-reproachful. She pressed her lips together. Then she said softly, thanks, but you don't even know my goal, Lo. Ro only glanced at her and replied, even if I don't know, I can still help. Unexpectedly, Look cut him off, I'll tell you. Her eyes showed determination as she raised her voice. What my true goal is. Rankings, the list of the best, from top to bottom. So everyone fights to climb higher. Being ranked brings honor and proves one's worth. But what if the opposite existed? What if in this world there were a list that recorded people rising up from the bottom? The worst rankings. Look's face turned angry. She ground her teeth and said, that's it, the dark side of the rankings that I'm chasing. The story goes back to when Look was a child. 5 years ago she had a very close friend. Her friend was a blind blonde child, a girl named Miriella. She was the only one who sincerely supported Look. Blind since birth, she'd never seen the world, so she never mocked Look's dreams. On the bench Miriella exclaimed admiringly, Look, you're amazing. Do you want to become an appraiser? She excitedly shared her dream. My dream is to become an appraiser and break the rankings. There's no greater honor than recording great people myself. People who will make history. After explaining, Look leaned back on the bench and complained resentfully, but the others say I'll never make it. You're the only one who believes in me, Miriella. Miriella agreed and said, maybe this school is too small for someone like you. Look, she then shifted topics. Hey, yesterday my family got invited on a cruise. Miriella hesitated as she recalled, I think it's called some Bond something, before Look jumped up and shouted, Bond Solutions? She immediately leaned in and asked curiously, the luxury liner that just launched? Miriella answered awkwardly, really? My dad accepted an invitation from relatives, so I'm not sure of the details. Then Miriella, a bit anxious, asked, so if you don't mind, I was wondering, do you want my ticket, Look? She froze in surprise and blurted out, what? She said matter-of-factly, because, anyway, I can't see a thing. Hearing that, Look puffed her cheeks in anger. She sprang to her feet and shouted, no. She turned to Miriella and declared firmly, if I go, I want to go with you. Miriella hesitated and said, but, before she could finish, Look quickly grabbed Miriella's hand. Then she solemnly vowed, I'll hold your hand the whole trip. Touched, Miriella laughed and said, thank you, I'll ask my father. Seeing that, Look followed with a bright smile. Miriella truly went home and made the request to her parents. Afterward, Miriella's mother gave up her ticket, and Look was able to board the Bond Solutions cruise. They held hands throughout the voyage. For Look, who couldn't fit in at school because of her grand dreams, Miriella was her only friend. They exchanged the most sincere affections. And with blind Miriella, her family was deeply grateful to Look. But on that voyage, a terrible incident occurred. 2 days later, the tragedy struck due to an engine failure. The ship ran aground and began sinking rapidly. In the control room, a crewman urgently reported that more than half the lifeboats were damaged in the collision. If we want to evacuate everyone with the remaining boats, it'll take 3 trips. Suddenly, the captain spoke calmly, ordering all passengers to assemble on deck. He pulled his hat low and announced gravely, I will decide who gets on the lifeboats. A crewman steadied himself and replied, understood, sir. The captain placed his hand on a book and murmured sadly, there's no choice but to use it. A short while later, everyone had gathered on deck. Following the captain's voice came the announcement. The passenger list for the first boat will be read now. If your name is called, please board the lifeboat immediately. Look tried her best to comfort Miriella. It's okay, Miriella. I'm here with you. While the captain read names over there, Jack Brown, Layer Ames. A few seconds later, her name was called by the captain. Look Ameldia. Hearing that, Look visibly brightened, and he continued reading Lucas Nixon, Oliver Crow. After a while, the captain stopped and declared, that is the complete passenger list for the first lifeboat. She couldn't believe it and whispered, what? Look whispered in panic. Why am I the only one? Seeing this, Miriella fell silent as if making a weighty decision. Then she suddenly let go of her hand. Realizing it, Look cried out in alarm, Miriella. She insisted, I'm fine, go ahead. Look faltered, but Muriella cut her off and explained seriously. There isn't time to argue. If we don't cooperate, no one will survive. She smiled sincerely and said, I believe you'll become an appraiser. Look, so I hope you'll believe in me the same way. Look held back her tears and replied, all right. Next, she was ferried safely to shore. The lifeboat reached shore and immediately returned to the ship. But after several trips, Look still couldn't find Muriella's figure. When they returned, Muriella was no longer on board. She looked out into the distance. What hit her eyes was the ship completely ablaze, and by the third rescue trip, it was already too late. Look sank to the ground, muttering, no way. At that moment, the conversation of two crewmen rang in her ears. Lucky we weren't on it, we've lived a hard life. Huh. Against the red flames, they spoke casually. Those at the bottom of the rankings get pushed off. Look edged closer and asked in disbelief, what do you mean by that? She clenched her anger and demanded, what is the worst ranking? The two froze and panicked. Kid, did you hear that? She clenched her fist, voice tight with anger as she warned. Look at his reaction. This isn't something everyone should know, is it? Then Look glared at them coldly and threatened. Explain. If you don't, I'll make sure the worst rankings spread all along this coast. One crewman, seeing this, relented and said, okay, I'll tell you, but don't you tell the captain. Hearing that, her eyes filled with growing hatred. Back at the fire, Look calmly recounted the worst rankings. She explained sadly. It's a ranking of people ordered from lowest ability upward, socially, economically, physically, mentally, ranking those who are weakest across all those areas. Look buried her face in her knees and continued. So you can tell at a glance. Understand? Tully said thoughtfully. It's used to decide who gets discarded if things go bad. She said nothing, only gave a grim nod. Then Look recounted despondently. Those who hold others' lives use it. Captains of luxury liners, hospital directors, politicians, they use it to decide whose life is prioritized. Her tone grew resolute. My goal is to erase this terrible ranking from the world. Under the starry sky, Look's voice rang with determination. I will never forgive the system that killed Muriella. A ranking that pushes people into hopelessness has no place in this world. Tully listened silently and pensively. Suddenly he asked, I get what the worst rankings are, but how does that relate to Russo? Look calmly laid out the plan. Simply put, I want to use one criminal to take down another. She explained solemnly. The worst rankings are unofficial lists, like Russo appearing on an unregistered criminal ledger. If we catch Russo and use him to extract information about those unofficial lists, we can get closer to whoever stands behind the worst rankings. That's why I want to bring that man, Dalken, down at any cost. Hearing this, Tully asked skeptically, any leads on the mastermind? She replied calmly, no leads, but given they've pulled in politicians and the wealthy, it must be a large organization. Her face serious, she analyzed that there might even be a covert version of the Institute, just my speculation. After that, the two fell silent. Suddenly Tully spoke encouragingly. You must have gone through so much. He offered solemn encouragement. You've carried all of this by yourself. He looked at her and confessed earnestly. It must hurt a lot. Yet you've never stopped. You're extraordinary. Look stood frozen, stunned. After a few seconds, she whimpered, don't. She buried her face in her knees again and said sadly, if you say things like that now, I'll cry. Hearing that, Tully fell genuinely silent. Then he gave a small, joyful smile. At that moment, Look suddenly made a request. Then you have to tell me too. Lo. She lifted her face to look at him and spoke with playful authority. It's not fair for only me to cry. Tell me your target. Tully didn't hesitate and agreed at once, all right. Suddenly he teased casually, but I won't cry. Look immediately retorted, no way. I'll make you cry right in my arms. The next day, in the quiet forest, a loud sob rang out. They saw Look crying bitterly. Tully looked at her and asked helplessly, still crying? She choked up and revealed, but I never wrote that Lo had gone through such hardships. Even if I cry all night, the tears won't stop. It took a long time for Look to calm down. She wiped her tears and said, now I understand why Lo was so anxious. He wanted to get to the island and confirm everyone was safe. He buckled his sword neatly and said, but I know that even if you're anxious, you still can't get there. Tully glanced at her and sincerely confessed, you taught me that. Look, he seriously asked a favor. If I fall short of anything in the future, please tell me. Hearing that, Look froze and blurted out, meaning what? Tully didn't answer but nodded firmly. He then extended his hand, speaking solemnly, please be my exclusive appraiser. This time it's official. Look wiped the corner of her eye and quietly agreed. She tied her hair up and put on her hat. Then she reached out, her face bright, and replied, I will never regret it. Hearing that, he smiled gently. Then the two clasped hands tightly. On the trail, Look walked while observing, we've gone quite far already. She turned to look at Tully and said, hopefully it can find its way home smoothly. Suddenly he asked curiously, by the way, where do royal antlers live? She answered smoothly, mostly in caves. Look calmly explained, they are very resilient, so they rarely need to hunt. Therefore, they usually live quietly inside caves. At that moment, the white Qilin suddenly growled. Right after, it quickly ran forward. Look hurried after it and announced it's definitely nearby. Lo, don't lose it. Ro Tully replied firmly, understood. So the white Qilin ran a long stretch through the forest. The two were following when they suddenly noticed something ahead. Right in front of them was a huge rock. Look said suspiciously, this is... She examined it and asked puzzlingly, just a big boulder? Suddenly she thought of something and immediately denied it. No. Then Look swiftly ran off. Could it be? When she saw its true form, she cried out in fear, Muse mimic, no way. Could such a rare monster still exist here? She reached out and felt its body, murmuring thoughtfully, but it's dead. I see, then all the mysteries are solved. Hearing this, Ro Tully asked curiously, what do you mean? Look stood up and explained, do you know about mimics? They're monsters that use treasure to lure people, then swallow them. She then mentioned the mimic's ability. Muse mimics use monsters instead of treasure. They swallow rare beasts inside their bodies to lure poachers. Mimics live symbiotically with monsters and together swallow poachers. Look continued to inspect the creature's body and added, they're also called mobile museums. They travel around collecting all kinds of rare beasts. Hearing that, Ro Tully understood and asked, could the royal antlers be inside this one? She responded with a yes. Following her serious tone of analysis, when a Muse mimic goes hunting, it releases all the stored monsters inside at once to attack poachers, but this time it seems they were counterattacked. He immediately thought of someone and breathed out, Dalcan. On the other side, Look took notes and deduced, so our ecological survey is complete. The cause of the mass monster outbreak in the Azaban forest was the Muse mimic's death, which released all the creatures inside at once and disrupted the ecosystem. That gives us enough basis for our report. Suddenly Ro Tully spoke solemnly. That's terrifying. He looked at the wounds on the Muse mimic and asked, were those injuries also caused by poachers? She glanced over and immediately denied it. No, they probably appeared after it died, from other monsters feeding on it. She inspected the injuries and reasoned seriously that Muse mimics share a very tight bond with their symbiotic monsters. So whoever did this must be a monster native to this forest. Beside them, the white Qilin mournfully stared at the carcass. Ro Tully slowly stepped closer to it. He rubbed its back as if to comfort it and said, you have lost your home too. He said calmly, I understand that feeling. Like your heart has been torn apart. It stood there and listened quietly. Look, moved by his words, called out his name, Lo. Suddenly the ground trembled violently, shattering that sorrowful silence. They saw a giant red monster approaching behind them. Her face hardened and she barked. That's the one we saw before. Brad Orc appeared, howled, and swung an attack. It slammed down where the two stood, but thankfully Ro Tully swiftly scooped them up to dodge. He stood protectively in front of Look. After the Brad Orc's attack, it suddenly stopped. Then it turned and grabbed the Muse mimic's body. The next moment, it greedily began to gnaw on the dead creature. Seeing this, Look cried out in horror. It already ate it. Suddenly, the white Qilin that had been standing still shot forward. It lunged at the Brad Orc and leaped to attack. She panicked and shouted, don't. The red monster swatted and sent the white Qilin flying. It skidded across the ground and finally came to a stop with great difficulty. But the white Qilin rose again, resilient. Its body trembled as it watched the enemy with cautious eyes. Then it crouched into an attack stance, ready to fight on. At that moment, Ro Tully stepped forward and drew his sword. Wait right there. He pointed his blade at the Brad Orc and said, I'll take it down. Suddenly a voice echoed in his head. You say you have a move you want to use, but you always fail, right? A memory flashed back. Ro Tully was talking with Eddie Marman. When Eddie heard his problem, he pondered and replied, I'm not very versed in swordsmanship using prana, right? He admitted frankly, I think I fail because I can't control prana. Hearing that, Eddie brightened and said, if that's the case, it's simple. Eddie Marman confidently declared, I'll teach you the prana control method passed down in the marksman family. You'll probably pick it up quickly. Back in the present, Ro Tully closed his eyes and recalled the technique. A moment later, he snapped his eyes open. With a dazed look, Ro Tully announced aloud, the method of controlling prana. Eddie Marman put a hand on his hip and sighed. You roughly understand how to enhance the 5 senses now, right? Next, you use those senses to look inward at yourself. The protagonist tilted his head slightly and looked inward at himself. He waved his hands to illustrate, like looking down from above, viewing yourself from over your head. A hint flashed in his eyes. Try it, and you'll see something interesting. Through Eddie Marman's lens, Ro Tully seemed to show something striking, especially for someone like him whose whole body is suffused with prana. The effect would be even more pronounced. Back in the present, he relaxed and closed his eyes tightly. With his senses heightened, he looked inward at himself. Before him loomed the Brad Orc, a beast as large as a small mountain. Slowly, something began to form and surround the protagonist. More precisely, that something originated from Tully himself. Though his eyes were shut, he could see the source of his power more clearly than ever. This is me. Movements like pulses ran through his body. The flow of prana was chaotic. The familiar sensation made it easier to acclimate. I get it now. If it's like this, then. He snapped his eyes open, his pupils blazing. His gaze locked onto the target instantly. The Brad orc, sensing danger, turned its head. But it was too late. The tip of his blade had gathered enough power and was already aimed at it. In a desperate charge, it closed its eyes and rushed forward, hoping for a final clash. Tully gripped the hilt with both hands and whispered, "The middle way." The sharp blade arced through the air as he coldly intoned the name of the new technique. Flowing transformations. The momentum behind the strike was truly formidable. Look, who had been watching, was dazzled by that sword move, and her eyes went wide. The second move, did it succeed? But he shook his head. No, one move alone isn't enough. Then he swung his sword again and again. With each strike, the speed grew more and more uncanny. His eyes hardened as he explained in a low voice. Flowing transformations is a technique built from successive slashes, and that number has no end point. Amid the countless cuts, the Brad orc could only bellow in despair. With a metallic clang, Tully sheathed his sword. The moment he turned his back, a violent explosion erupted. Look's eyes went wide in awe. When it was over, Tully slowly walked over to the white Qilin. He spoke softly to soothe it. "Don't be afraid." He reached out his hand. "I'm not your enemy." The white Qilin approached and sniffed his hand a few times. Look was moved, seeing it place its hoof on Tully's hand. She thought to herself that at this point it was better to accompany the royal antler. The forest was far too dangerous now. Looking up at the clear sky, Look wondered, would it be okay not to write on the owl's side? At that moment, in another corner of the forest, the bastard Dalcan was brutalizing a wild white Qilin, causing it to let out piteous cries. He held a sharp weapon in both hands, looked down at the trembling, pitiful Qilin and snarled, "Won't you just stand still? I can't strike accurately like this." Losing patience, he turned to Rosso Cruel and asked, "Hey, it won't hurt if it's a bit mangled, right?" The smuggler immediately tried to stop him. "No, the price will drop." Throwing his weapon to the ground, Dalcan snapped, "Why does it matter? You're going to grind it to powder anyway." He tapped his cane and explained, "If it's already powder from the start, they'll suspect it's fake." Hidden high in a tree, Eddie Marman and Owl Darkus had been watching for some time. Owl muttered angrily, "Damn, it's nauseating just to look," and Eddie agreed, "Yeah." The brown-haired kid tried to stay calm. "But that's not an opponent we can beat," Owl said. "I know, we have no choice but to report this to the assessment bureau." Down below, Rosso was counting cages. "Looks like we've gathered almost all the goods," Dalcan suddenly said out of nowhere. "Then now's the time." He pinched his index finger and thumb together, holding them up to his widened eyes. "Deal with those bastards who are spying on us." The two hiding in the tree suddenly felt an enormous pressure. Too late. Dalcan whooshed down and reached the base of the tree where they were hiding. He threw a punch that smashed the ancient tree to splinters, and the two had to leap out to avoid the blow. Owl and Eddie skidded several meters before regaining their footing. The kid looked at the hulking man before him. "We'd hidden our presence, so when did you notice us?" His answer was blunt. "From the start, kids." Then he casually pointed out their mistake. "You were hunting the monsters up there while we were tracking the merchandise, so all the nearby monsters' presence was under our control." Eddie cursed inwardly, this bastard. A flicker of worry touched him. A third-tier triple-digit adventurer isn't just about raw strength. Owl acted, hurling a weapon forward. Dalcan calmly reached out and caught it. Oh my. He seemed to know that what was thrown was a sandbag, followed by an arrow. A trick used twice? It turned out to be a smokescreen to buy time to flee. Standing amid the choking dust, he roared, "I'll kill you." Owl spun and shouted, "Run." Eddie didn't hesitate either, already running. Even while sprinting full out, Owl knew escaping with a trick like last time wouldn't work. "What do we do?" An idea flashed into the kid's head. Eddie suddenly plucked a leaf, puzzling Owl. "Now we can only increase our survival chances, even if just a little." The kid bit down until his fingertip bled. Then he smeared the blood across the leaf. Done, he wrapped the leaf around the arrowhead. With a whiz, the arrow shot off along its trajectory. Both of them watched the arrow's path. Eddie sighed, "I did everything I could." At that moment, they sensed he had closed in on them. Dalcan radiated a fierce killing intent. "What, you're still not running?" He laughed loudly. "Clever thinking, you don't know this terrain like I do. I'll kill you in one strike." Owl snapped, "Don't get in my way," and Eddie curled his lip. That line should have been mine. As he drew an arrow from the quiver, the kid whispered, "An archer can only truly show their skill with cover. It's a mistake to think this will be like the trials." Beside him, Owl slowly drew a sharp sword from its sheath and, coincidentally, said, "I'm different from the trials too. Team combat is my specialty, and having allies close by makes it easier to demonstrate my skills. A blue prana began to rise around Eddie. I won't follow sloppy orders. Around Owl, red prana flared. Good. They spoke in unison very well. They took their stances, ready to face the fight. Shall we go? Ro turned his head to look. He looked up at the sky and thought he felt a strange surge of energy. Was it just a mirage? Look stepped forward and called low about what to do with the royal horn from now on. The white Qilin closed its eyes and listened to Look's suggestion. At this point, I think we should protect this child and take it to the assessment bureau. This isn't my first time guarding a magical beast. Let me handle it. Ro looked at her and slowly analyzed the situation. That man won't sit still. If he intends to leave the forest with the royal horn, our only option is to defeat Dalkan. Look agreed, I think so too. She held up 2 fingers and continued. Exactly 2 options came to mind. Look folded her arms and elaborated. First, wait for Owl to report to the assessment bureau and await reinforcements. But the opponent is Dalkan. If someone like Mr. Loud is waiting, they'll rush over. Otherwise, it will take time to gather. Ro's voice grew low. Dalkan controls Ki better than I do. I'm not confident I can keep evading his perception forever. Look's eyelids twitched slightly. She frowned and suggested the other option is very simple. Ro listened intently. A wave of energy spread throughout the forest. A group of men thundered in, running over. Dalkan thrust his massive hand forward, startled. What? Eddie and Owl were channeling their energy. They listened warily as he continued, you two can use Ki as well? The Ki flow from the two was extremely abundant and stable, to be exact. The Ki around Eddie and Owl kept glowing. Not might be but able to. For example, to obtain it, humans awaken Ki by mastering a particular discipline, but without a trigger they cannot awaken. Owl had faced life and death battles and fought with everything he had. Over years as a mercenary he honed his group combat senses. He's also skilled at assessing an enemy's true strength and hasn't struggled in recent years. Eddie is a genius archer, born to noble blood. With the influence of a prestigious family, no one dares challenge him. The two stood like a statue of success. Regrettably, neither had ever known failure. But fortunately, they recently encountered an anomaly who uses Ki named Lo Tuli. Owl raised his sword, ready to fight. That was enough. Eddie set his bow and arrow in position to awaken. Owl lunged at Dalkan. Dalkan managed to dodge his sword strike. Dalkan's eyes flashed as he threw a punch at Owl. Owl slashed his sword to block the punch. They collided in a burst of sparks. Owl's eyes also lit up. Seeing something, he thought, I see it. This is the power of Ki, isn't it? At that moment, Eddie raised his bow and watched the two of them intently. He squinted. Actually, I used it before in the forest, but this is the first time I can see its color. He furrowed his brow. His pupils flared an electric blue. Eddie told himself inwardly, now I can shoot with even greater accuracy. The arrow sped off with skill, an arrow that homes in. Just as Dalkan dodged Owl's attack, he fell directly into Eddie's sights. The arrow aimed straight for the back of his neck. He stared at the arrowhead and cursed, you bastard. Aim where I'm dodging. He pushed his Ki to the limit. His whole body began to glow. The arrow fell to the ground. A rolled cloth sack was thrown up into the air. Dalkan looked up. The smoke bomb exploded with a boom. Dust everywhere. Dalkan grimaced. He startled and looked down. An arrow from Eddie shot toward him. His foot skidded across the ground. Following the arrow's line, he spotted Eddie on a nearby branch. The boy's expression was resolute as he stared at Dalkan. Dalkan hurriedly calculated in his head. He can aim at anywhere I go. He climbed the tree at the same time as the feint. At that moment Owl seized the chance to swing his sword, but Dalkan quickly stepped back and avoided the lethal blow. He realized his situation was tense. When the archer shares a position, the swordsman will hunt relentlessly, and their coordination is highly precise. He studied Owl's cold expression and thought, so this is the brains, eh? Owl's fingers moved subtly into a secret sign. Quick-witted Dalkan noticed and internally admired. Oh, even using hand signals. If you gave me a bit more time I could trace it. But these guys are too good at deception. He fell silent. Suddenly he rubbed the back of his neck. I give up. He continued, trading magical beasts is such a hassle. Wasting effort on you is pointless, so I'll only deal with you roughly. Sharp Ki aura radiated from his hand as he emphasized. Understand? Veins bulged on Dalkan's hand as he tried to convey his point with force. This isn't a gap you can solve with brains alone. At that moment, Owl shouted at the top of his lungs, don't underestimate us. From above, Eddie released his grip and the arrow left the bow. Dalkan clenched both hands into his guard. Sword and arrow attacked together. Dalkan used Ki to envelop both the sword and the arrow. He coldly threw a punch, announcing speed class 48. Owl leaned back and uttered a sound, ko. One of Dalkan's hands gripped the tip of Owl's sword and raised it high. Owl stared in shock at Dalkan. He crushed the sword tip with bare hands, explaining, grip strength class 19. He launched a kick, striking Owl's body. Blood spurted from his mouth. Cut. Seeing Owl collapse to the ground, Eddie called down anxiously, "Owl." Eddie was stunned. Dalken uprooted the very tree Eddie had been standing on. Annotation: weightlifting, rank 7. Owl choked out a barely audible call, "Eddie." Dalken rubbed his neck again and laughed. "Oh, still gasping for life? Huh. But the organs are ruined, so I can't even sell you anymore." He raised his hand high and yelled, "Then die." A streak of green light shot forward. Wrapped tightly around Dalken's arm, he glanced over in surprise. Ro stepped forward, cheerful. "Thanks for the message on the arrow. Because of it I wasn't late." Owl whispered, speaking to Eddie. Dalken grimaced. "You again." Ro declared solemnly, the simplest final method. He now stepped his sword forward, ready to fight. "I'll defeat you." The images of the two appeared together. Lo Tuli, Adventurer rank 2728. Dalken Iris, Adventurer rank 672. Rosso Cruel looked at the cages before him, thought for a moment, then said, "Dalken is late." He adjusted his glasses and looked seriously at the object in his hand. Could he really be struggling against those kids? Rosso Cruel pondered the young man he'd met. If there's an unpredictable variable, it's that brat. His prana, indeed. Then suddenly he broke into a mysterious smile. On this side Ro was facing Dalken. Both exchanged razor-sharp looks, the key around them seeming to press to overpower the other. Dalken then lunged like a lightning bolt, throwing a punch at Ro that caught him a bit off guard. Then came a flurry of blows powered by terrifying physical strength landing on Ro. With his quick eyes, Ro swiftly swung his sword and parried the opponent's punch. Immediately after, he used his foot to spring upward into the air. Without many words, he swung his sword and unleashed a divine palm strike down toward Dalken standing below. Ro closed in quickly on his opponent, giving him a murderous glare. At that moment Dalken also launched his powerful punch, and the two poured their full strength into attacks against each other, producing a massive explosion. Ro's technique caused Dalken to lose balance and be pushed back. He now looked at him with caution. "Your footwork has improved a bit." Ro said nothing, only stared at the man with killing intent. However, Dalken mocked him afterward, but only slightly. Then, as if releasing all his power, he angrily said, "You are still not my match." This overwhelming source of power startled Ro. Before he could understand what was happening, Dalken's body quickly surged forward, and he delivered a powerful kick. Ro was blown backward by the force of that strike. Then he quickly landed and returned to a fighting stance. However, Dalken suddenly appeared from the smoke and hurled a punch at him. With swift movement, Ro nimbly dodged to one side. Dalken then charged at the tree before him, glanced back and said, "What's going on?" He used his strength to casually strike, so the whole tree lunged straight toward Ro. You can't win by just running away. Ro had no choice. He could only duck low and brace himself. At that moment Dalken charged at him with killing intent. Die. In the desperate moment Ro suddenly remembered one thing. Remember, Dalken's adventurer rank is 672. He immediately countered with his sword. "I've fought opponents stronger than him before. Don't underestimate the adventurer rankings." Under the opponent's overwhelming pressure, Ro steadied himself. "Don't be afraid." Immediately, Ro's whole body emitted a blue glow. Dalken was astonished when he saw it. "What?" Ro seemed to gain extra strength, his eyes like streaks of lightning. Ro surged forward at his opponent. Dalken, having taken a hit from Ro, was furious. "A fake move based on prana, that brat is copying my technique." Ro said calmly, "Technique? That doesn't even deserve to be called a technique." Dalken couldn't accept it. He swung his fist at Ro again. "Don't talk nonsense." While dodging Dalken's blow, Ro recalled past experiences. "It's unnecessary to face someone stronger head-on. Think the way you just did." Earlier Owl had told him many people are mistaken, but tactics aren't about invention. They vary with the knowledge you possess, the patterns you've memorized. The foundation of tactics is gaining numerical advantage. I'll teach you a few simple patterns to achieve that. Understand? Tactics are ways to create situations. I will explain them now. Ro quickly recalled the steps Owl had taught. First, ambush through team coordination. Second, lure the enemy into your territory. Third, coordinate attacks with a hidden unit for a surprise strike. From behind, Owl appeared and lunged at Dalken. Dalken couldn't believe his eyes. You can still move?" Owl forced a reluctant smile. "You bastard, you're really making me work for it." Immediately after, Owl wrapped his arms tightly around Dalken's back. At that moment Owl shouted, "Right now." Dalken, restrained and unable to move, screamed, "You damned bastard." He then released a massive burst of power that sent both of them flying apart. He then charged toward Ro and said, "It's unfortunate for you." Just as Dalken's fist was about to strike Ro, an arrow swept across the man's eyes, making him scream in pain. From behind, Eddie, who was sitting under the tree, had drawn his strength to fire an arrow this way and said, "Go on." Lo, while the man was completely unguarded, Ro quickly swung his sword in a diagonal slash across his belly.
Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more awesome content.